Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a little after 7 o'clock on March 21st, and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Wareham School Committee. First order of business is public participation. Is there anybody who would like to address the committee?
I would love to address the committee.
We'd be happy to have you address the committee. If you would do us a, excuse me?
Where would you like me to go?
There's a microphone set up right there at the table, if that works for you. Well, it's because
It's for the TV cameras.
Oh, that's great. I'll try to filter myself.
Thank you very much. Could you just identify yourself, please?
My name is Jane Barbosa.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thanks. My daughter is a student at Wareham High School. I've had several discussions with Dr. Rabinovich, middle school, and I had some tough years. We are 6.5 months into her Wareham High School career, and I've been trying to contact her dean of students, which is Ms. Finelli, since Monday. I have CC'd Dr. Rabinovich and Scott Palladino on emails regarding issues that I've had this week.
I have not received them.
I did send you an email yesterday, and I sent you another one today, and then I realized it was a school committee meeting. I also CC'd Mr. Ponce tonight, because he has dealt with it as Mr. Lozan has, and I did not CC him on the issues.
Ms. Barbosa, I'm just going to interrupt you, just
Sure.
as a courtesy to you, not to us.
Right.
If this is something related to your child,
My issue is communication.
okay,
And
there's,
yes, it
there's
is.
no, well, I just wanted to make sure there was nothing confidential at all about what you're going to say, because we want to respect the confidentiality of your child.
That's fine with me.
Okay, go ahead, please.
I have been trying to contact the administration of Wareham High School since Monday. It is Wednesday. I have not received an email or a phone call back yet concerning another student swearing obscenities at my daughter in an honors biology class on Monday afternoon. She's sent out of the room. She is let back in the classroom today because the high school has a 2-day period when skip a day of that class. There's an honors program. I was promised by the school committee and by the superintendent that this behavior would not be tolerated in the high school period. I was also told that once my daughter got to the high school, she would have the opportunities of the honors program. Is that correct, Dr. Rabinovich?
Yes, ma'am.
I am shocked and disgusted that this behavior is allowed in an honors class. Period, end of sentence. Shouldn't be happening in any classroom, but an honors class. And we discussed it in June at the end of the year last year, and I was promised that this behavior does not occur. It is not tolerated at the high school, and considering that my daughter was such an academic achiever, that she would have the ability to go into honors classes, which she is. And she is straight A's in all of our honors classes, and was invited to join the National Junior Honor Society last week. I do not understand why another student would be able to walk up to my daughter, and you might want to edit, and call her a fucking bitch in the middle of an honors class, period. I was under the impression that it was a privilege to sit in one of those classrooms. Am I right?
A high-quality education in Wareham is a right, not a privilege, and what you're alleging is outrageous conduct. I agree with you.
The teacher was out of the room. There was a student teacher in the class at the time. The student was sent out to the hallway. She's back in the classroom today.
There was a student teacher in the classroom?
There was a student teacher in the classroom when Ms. Higgins.
You mean like a
was
college student?
I believe so. His name is Mr. Kudo. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I don't know what his
Thank you.
credentials are.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell the committee?
Well, I was under the impression that something was being done, even though I wasn't contacted after 3 emails, and I sent another one again. I tried to go through the proper channels, because apparently I did not follow the proper channels when I tried to contact Mr. Gilmore and Mrs. Pront last year in the middle school. and I was told that I did not follow proper procedure, and that's why nothing was handled, and nothing was handled correctly. So this year, I have decided to try and go the right route and follow the procedures that we have both agreed to. You as the administration and us as the community. We have all agreed that these are the procedures that we need to follow. We have also agreed that we need to communicate to one another. And I think that that type of behavior, I don't care what else was going on that day, that's my kid. And she should not have to walk into the high school and be prepared to deal with that type of behavior, period, end of sentence, especially in an honors class. It was a teachable moment, and we let it slide. We as a community. We blew it off, and that's it. She's back in the classroom today. I'm disgusted and disappointed. And I cannot believe that no one has even had the audacity to send me a quick email and say, listen, we're working on it. Pick up the phone and call me and say, listen, we're going to deal with it. I don't know what the consequences are now. I've heard nothing. Nothing. So until, now she's threatening my daughter in the hallway, and then she made another comment today.
Mrs.
So
Sweat,
whatever
this really
punishment
needs to
was laid
stop.
down, it wasn't effective.
Okay, ma'am, I appreciate your outrage. I'm very glad that you came.
Now you're going to tell me this isn't a forum to display it.
Absolutely not.
Right.
I'm
Well,
not,
When
Miss-
you give me no choice,
Miss
and I
Barboza.
get no response back, then what do? I get in the car and I drive to the school committee so that I can meet someone face to face so that we can actually have a conversation.
Ms. Barboza, I didn't tell you it was the wrong forum. I'm happy that you're here, okay? However, I think we get the message. I appreciate your outrage. I appreciate your passion. I agree with you 100% that this conduct in any class of any nature is inappropriate. It will be investigated. I am sure that Dr. Rabinovich is taking notes to make sure that the communication that you requested takes place. And to the extent that to the extent that there have not been consequences appropriate for the alleged actions, obviously that will be investigated as well. So there's lots of things that need to be looked into, and the school committee and Dr. Rabinovich will make sure it happens.
I can't understand how anyone would disagree with me and say that that was appropriate conversation for an honors class, period, end of sentence. I really don't see the need for any discussion on that matter.
My problem solely is, as much as I appreciate everything you're saying, and until I have other information that substantiates what you're saying, it is one person telling me something. And as much as I'm not saying you're not telling me the truth, it is still one person relaying information.
Right.
This is the first I have heard of it,
I understand.
okay? So the investigation will,
I'll CC you.
I'd be happy to be CC'd.
That's great.
But the point here is, you've gone beyond just foul language. You've also alleged harassment, and that concerns me a great deal.
Yes, I know, it concerns me as well. It concerned me for 3 years while my daughter was in the middle school, and it continues.
So,
It continues and continues. So now, could you please guide me as a parent in what procedure that I need to follow to ensure that there is some communication made towards me so that I know what's going on a daily basis?
I can assure you
Because
that,
I need to explain it to my daughter.
I can assure you that Dr. Rabinovich will investigate, and that you'll either be contacted by him or Mr. Palladino shortly. Is that fair, Dr. Rabinovich?
It is fair. If I may, though, Mrs. Barboza, you did find a way last year, when you were outraged at what happened at the middle school, to find your way into my office on probably 3 or 4 occasions, in which we sat down. I remember a meeting we had with Mr. Gilmore where we addressed your issues. This year, this is the first that I'm hearing of this. You say you've emailed me. I have not received it. So, as far as I know, there's no message on my secretary's phone. So, I understand you're outraged. We will investigate it. I will talk to Mr. Palladino, and I'm sure he'll talk to you. But at this point, I don't have any other information to say what has occurred and how it's been handled.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can we just take this offline as an action item and ask that through you, the superintendent contact Principal Palladino and try to chronological order as to what happened, and also I would like a report to come back to the school committee of what took place from tonight until some answers are taken on this issue, because this was an issue that was brought up last year through a meeting with myself, Dr. Rabinovich, Mr. Barboza, and Mr. Gilmore, I believe.
Yes, that's right.
And it appears that it's still ongoing issues now in another school. So me, as a committee member, I would like answers to this as soon as possible.
That's fine. Dr. Rabinovich will report back to the committee, keeping in mind that any report back to the committee will have to respect the confidentiality of both your child as well as any other child involved in the incidents.
Thank you.
Ms. Barboza, anything else you'd like to say?
No, that's it.
Ms. Barboza, thank you very much for coming.
Great.
Is there anybody else who'd like to address the committee? Okay, second item on the agenda is good news. Dr. Rabinovich.
Let's see. For good news tonight, our Destination Imagination team from the middle school is going on to the state tournament on March 31st. Two other teams placed in their regional challenges. Both the Minot team came in second, and our first-year high school came in third. Robin Murphy, the Minot Forest instructional leader, is our Destination Imagination coordinator and works with the Minot teams. And I will send out to you for information the rest of the names, but I think this is very good. Project Imagination, or Destination Imagination, is a gifted and talented program where children get to use their creative skills on challenges that are given, and they compete with children from across the state. And so the fact that this is the first time that I'm aware that we've gone to the regional challenge. So it's good news for Robin and the team.
Excellent.
Second bit of good news was I believe it was in your school committee package, is a list of the college acceptances that we have received this far. Is that in people's packages?
Yes.
So, there's 144 colleges that have accepted Wareham High School students, and, all the way from Arizona State at the top of the list down to Worcester State. So, A to W. And it's still early. Some of the Ivy Leagues, do not give early acceptance. We have to wait until the April 15th tax date before those come in. And hopefully we'll have a larger list at a later meeting. So that was also good news. And I'm sure somebody would like to talk about our varsity basketball team.
You think so?
I think so.
Okay. Is that what you'd like to talk about, Rhonda?
Very much so.
Okay, but in deference to our president of the Massachusetts, I'm going to get the title wrong, but he's head of Massachusetts JBA, is that the correct title?
Basketball officials.
High school basketball officials.
High school basketball officials. Perhaps you'd like to put the official note on this basketball team.
Well, first of all, to piggyback off the good news for the college list, that's unbelievable, especially when you consider the school system has no money. The kids are doing good with what we have, and that's a statement to the principals and the teachers and everyone. So, good news for the Wareham basketball, 24-1. I know all the years that Dr. Sylvia coached, in 24 years, he didn't have 24 wins when you combine the 24 years together. So, to Kevin Brigioli
And I didn't even call you a zebra.
well, you just did offline. To Kevin Brigioli and the freshman and junior varsity, I'm sure Mr. Palladino is proud of them, as well as Ms. Loranja. They were there at the TD Garden, and somebody has to lose the game, but it was a great season, and it's good to see that the town is in full support. Wareham travels 8 buses deep to all the games, and it was a great run. And in our mind, they're still champions. They did not meet the same level that the team did 2 years ago, but they got further than anybody expected. The team we had 2 years ago, we figured was going to win. So that's good news. And the other good news I read I think in our package was, I think it's a great job by the Deacon School PTA. They're doing a playground over there. And to the people in the community, if you're handy, I know Mr. Flaherty is, so maybe we'll get him out there to go out and help when the parts come in to rebuild the playground. I just want to say that's a nice job on the part of the PTA and Deacon School.
Thank you. Cliff, any good news?
Yeah, I think so. And just to build on what Ken said, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we lost to the state champs. So they went on to win. The team we lost to in
No
Danvers went
surprise.
on to win the state championship. Yeah, I've got good news. It kind of goes oh hum, because they have a tradition of excellence. And our DECA program went to state finals, state competition. And from what I understand, we had, I think it was around 15, I'm not exactly sure of the number, but 15 to 20 kids that ended up as state finalists, which is unbelievable in the entire state. And we've got, I think, 7 kids going on to national competition. So I think that that says an awful lot for our program, our kids. And again, like I say, usually it's an oh-hum situation because we've kind of expected them to do well. But they from year to year, they don't disappoint. And I'm very, very proud of our kids and the teachers and the parents, because I think it's a team effort on that. And it's purely academic, and it's good to see our kids rise to the cream in terms of academics. So I'm really happy about that.
Thank you. Rhonda?
Along those lines, Dr. Urbanich, I don't have the full details, but the Imagination Destination group,
Yes.
did you already mention that?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep, okay.
You were having a thoughtful
Yeah,
moment.
I was thinking about the future agenda items. The only thing I wanted to know, Jess, did you hear from your school? You accept?
Oh, I haven't heard from my last school. I have applied to 6. I got into 5 of them, and I'm still waiting on BU. But of course, they have an April 1st. That's when they release them. So,
Still waiting.
But you're
Yeah.
5 for 5.
yeah,
5 for 6. We're still waiting on one.
yeah.
She's 5 for 5.
Okay.
She hasn't been rejected from the 6.
No, absolutely not.
Hopefully I
Children,
won't.
let's play nice.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
That is good news, too.
I want to piggyback on a couple of those things. One is I was fortunate enough to be on the bus, not only for the TD Garden playoff game, but also for the UMass Boston playoff game. Not only did the team handle themselves extremely well, but I thought we were extremely well represented by the fans that attended these games. So I think the high school has a lot to be proud of in how it was represented on and off the court. I also want to compliment our new athletic director. Doesn't seem new anymore because he's such a presence. But spring sports started with incredible weather, but also incredible enthusiasm, and I think a lot of that has to do with Mr. LaRanger. And finally, I want to comment on the DECA program. My own personal experience with students of DECA is because people in the audience may not, and listening at home, may not appreciate the impact that DECA, by my observation, seems to have on students. It, for whatever reason, it generates more confident, more articulate young adults. And that is worth an incredible amount when they're out there trying to seek employment in this tough time. The only sad part, I know this is supposed to be good news, the only sad part is that I was informed by Teacher Sylvia that, yes, there is a younger version, thankfully, of Teacher Sylvia, that some kids were denied the ability to participate for financial reasons. And that is quite unfortunate because the impact of participation is so positive. And then my personal bit of good news, I participated in a combination Big Brother, not Big Brother, excuse me, Boys and Girls Club. I guess you'd call it job preparation. It's a program designed to give assistance to people in interviewing skills and job application skills. And some of those kids were Wareham High School kids, and they did extremely well. Just the fact that they chose to come to this on a Saturday afternoon was a tribute to their commitment to become better and more independent professional adults. So kudos to them for being there. Are we all set with good news? Yes, please.
Can I just make one comment? I'm glad you brought that up, because you want to put it in a certain amount of perspective. We had almost 70 kids qualify for states, and we had about 36 go.
Exactly. Exactly.
And on that note about DECA, just in your package, there was a thing about Wareham Works. This is an annual thing that they have in Town Hall. So this year, it's about education. Education is the key to success. And the DECA program is going to be doing the presentation for the Wareham Public Schools at this event. They're going to man the table, and the students are actually going to do the presentation about the programs at Wareham High School. And Scott and I will be standing there in the background smiling, watching them do their thing. So just adding to DECA.
Thank you.
And then I have something.
He's good.
Oh, and we have one more person here, too.
Jessica?
There's two things going on next week at the high school. We're having our annual talent show next Wednesday, March 28th from 7 to 9 p.m. And then also there's an art fair next Friday, March 30th. And then you can see all the students' artwork, and there's going to be different dances and performances and a bake sale.
So performing arts as well as...
Yes,
Ah,
as well as visual arts.
visual arts, yes, thank you.
Jess, what time is that Friday, March 3rd?
I want to say it starts at 6:30.
Thanks.
Are we all set with good news? Okay, minutes of the meeting of February 29th and March 8th.
Motion to approve the minutes of February 29th as recorded.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
Abstain.
301. The minutes of March 8th?
March 8th.
Yes, March 8th.
Motion to approve the minutes of March 8th as recorded.
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? 400. Thank you. The next item on the agenda are school committee reports, but in deference to the good folks who are here to talk about something a little further down on the list and their ability to go out and enjoy the rest of their evening, I'd like to skip down to item number 7, progress report on Inform. Mr. Luzon.
Well, good evening. I want to introduce two folks that are with me tonight, and that is Terry DiFilippo, our Coordinator of Technology, and that everybody knows, and also Ted Lindquist. Ted is the Director of Technology in Farmington, Connecticut, and a Pearson Inform consultant, and has been one of our 2 trainers during the last several months as we've rolled out the training of Inform. And I would also mention a man by the name of Jason Crair, who's also a Pearson Inform consultant, and Jason has been here as well doing some of the training. Tonight there's really 3 parts to what I would like to be able to do. One is just to give you a very, very quick overview of the training that's happened so far. Second part is that Ted is going to give a demo of 3 important areas within Inform to really give you a view of what people can see. Those 3 views include what a district-level administrator can see, what a building-level administrator or an instructional leader can see, and thirdly, what a teacher can see in regards to her own class and just how far we can drill down. Ted is going to use some demo data as well as our own data, but he can only go so far with our own data because we'd be identifying students. But I think you'll see that he's going to be able to show you quite a bit in those 3 areas. And then finally, just a question and answer period at the end. I just want to start very quickly by, there are 2 documents that you have. One is a several multi-page document, color, that's called an academic improvement plan. Ted will talk about that in a little bit. The second is the 1-page document, which is the SMART goals for the Pearson Informed Training rollout. And I want to just read from that very, very quickly, because the SMART goal is that teachers, administrators, and interventionists will have immediate access to and utilize student achievement data for the purpose of universal screening, progress monitoring, early intervening, and driving targeted and well-differentiated instruction at all levels of the tiered intervention model. And I say that to you now simply so that as you listen to Ted, you'll be able to hear whether, in fact, those things can occur as you view Inform in the demo model that you'll have. So our training is complete up through having the central administrative staff having 3 hours of training plus an initial overview. Building level administrators have had 6 hours of training. Instructional leaders have had 9 hours of training, 3 of those being with their building principals. And we have had all K-5 teachers, classroom as well as special education teachers and interventionists have the initial training at the end of their day. So our training rolls into next fall in terms of the more extensive training as they begin to use Inform more and more. But we were able to accomplish all of the pieces that we anticipated accomplishing in terms of the training. So I'm going to turn it over to Ted so that he can actually demo for you, both through a training set of data as well as Wareham's data as it is currently in Inform.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just one question before we move on. So, Bob, are teachers capturing data on students right now, or is the plan to start capturing data in the fall of the next school year?
There's already data in our Inform database.
That we uploaded from?
Right.
Okay.
So a teacher, K-5, today can go into Power School and look at the data that we have, and we'll talk a little bit about exactly what that data is today.
But they're not inputting additional data into the system yet?
We've input all of the MCAS scores for the last year, Dibbles Next, grade scores. So all of the formative assessments are in.
Okay.
So we'll talk about next steps and what are the types of
jump
data
ahead.
that we need to go to. And so, but let me have Ted come up and show you some of the pieces and just how, it's very interesting. If you have really, really good eyes, you'll see as he hovers over things that there is a drill that's actually the pointer. And it's literally drilling down into the data. So it's just kind of interesting that Pearson used this little icon of a drill as their pointer. And then we'll have time for questions and answers that Terry and Ted and I can address.
I would prefer that there be strategic moments where you would stop and ask questions rather than having them saved all for the end. I think it flows better if you do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
All right, well, it's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for moving up on the agenda. And I will say, just as I log in, I first had contact with Terry and Bob last summer on July 10th. I was on a bus in San Diego. I've never seen an implementation of Inform go more quickly and more strategically as what this team has put together. And the fact that you've got so many people trained already under a year is really remarkable. This is a test database, and it starts off with a dashboard. The dashboard allows everybody who comes in the ability to see a certain set of data that the district decides. So this is a district look at some state tests that all 3rd grade through 8th grade students take, and in essence, the big picture here is green is good and red is not so good. So that's the visual there. On any bar, I can hover over and I can click and I can get a list of names of the students who are in that group. And so I can pull those students up, I can see who they are, and I can do a couple things with them. I can print them out, I can dump them to an Excel spreadsheet, and so forth. Additionally, because I'm...
Excuse me,
Order.
excuse me.
Mr. Chair, I don't, if there's gonna be a lot of student information on the screen, I don't think we ought to go there.
I was told,
These are not ours.
Oh, okay,
This is
good.
a test database.
Sorry.
All fake names, everything's fake.
Please excuse me for my
No, great.
ignorance.
I'm glad
No,
you
no,
raised
no.
it so everybody could hear that out
All right.
there. So that's a good
Thank you.
piece. This is all fake data, all fake names, and all fake schools.
Thank you.
When
Yeah,
when
great.
we do get to the Wareham data, there will be no student.
Thank you.
We won't do that, yeah.
But Ted is real.
I know, it's the real deal.
It's just not his real name.
Yeah, it's just not my, okay.
I'll shut up.
No, very good, great.
no,
point.
that was a very important point,
Yeah.
thank you.
So one of the pieces is, I want you to think of this as an XY matrix of district, school, classroom, and then student, and then the buckets of curriculum, instruction, or assessment. So when we look at data, when you look at a red bar, you wonder, is the problem a curriculum problem? Is it an instructional problem? Is it an assessment problem? And so, again, we're on the district level, because this, so I'm gonna get rid of this. I'm gonna pull up some other kinds of reports that are doable here. And so, I'm gonna take a look here. Here is a comparison. This is one elementary school, first grade. This is first and second term local assessments. So you have state assessments and you have local assessments. So this does both and pulls them together. So this is taking a look at what's called the developmental spelling score, a text level score, and a writing on demand score. So I'm looking at this as an instructional person on the district level or the assistant superintendent on the district level, and I'm looking to see the comparison between term 1 and term 2. We're making progress. Look at that. That green is growing. We're making progress. The green is growing. Why aren't we making the same substantial progress on writing on demand on the district level? Our progress is there, but it's smaller. So possibly and that's at one school. It's at this one school. I want to go back and see, is the same thing true on the district level? So I backtrack, and now I'm looking at the district. And I can see that, in fact, you always hold your breath with technology. In fact, the pattern is pretty much the same. So when I look at that pattern, it makes me wonder if that's true across the district. It's not school specific. So I wonder if it's a curriculum problem that I need to address through in some professional development. And so I have a bucket that I want to deposit that in. I want to show you another report. And so, for example, here, this is a state test. And this state test is broken down. This is a math test, grade 3. This test is broken down into 25 sub-skills, or strands as they're called. And so you'll see that, there we go. So when you look at this, again, green is good as red is not so bad. If you look at this, there's some sort of elephants, and then there's some ants, some smaller pieces. So if I look at the elephant, I'm going to say, that's a district problem. I have a lot of kids not getting that one. That's a district problem, and I need to address that on a district level through my curriculum people and in instruction and through PD. When I look at the ants, I'm saying our curriculum's good. So I want to go down and I want to drill down to the school level or to the teacher level, and I want to see if one teacher I want a teacher to go in and look at his or her own data and see, are a lot of my kids not getting that? Or is it just at one school? And that way I know that I need to provide focused resources and focused PD in one area. If it's a few kids, I can also take those students, like here, and I can say, place value, that's a tough skill for kids. I'm going to take those students, and what I want to do is some focused instruction with just those students, because I'm convinced my curriculum is good because the majority of my students are using them. So I'm going to take all of those kids and I'm going to put them into a student group, and I'm going to assign them to an intervention strategy as well that I'm going to be able to document. Additionally, I'm a high school principal, and I want to know something about the incoming 9th graders. It's The spring, I'm doing programming for the 9th grade. And I want to know, what is the strength of this class as a group of readers who can handle nonfiction text? Because high school is about nonfiction. Success in high school, science and social studies is about nonfiction. This is a test that looks at a student's ability to handle nonfiction text. These are the students in the red bar who are going to have difficulty in high school. If I want to know who they are, and I want to program those kids in the 8th grade, I don't want to wait till they fail the first quarter in the 9th grade in those classes. And I want to make sure that I'm providing the right strategies and supports for those kids as they come in. So this is a longitudinal look at that group of students. One other piece that I can do I have specific populations, for example, who are strong or weak in certain areas? So before, the bars represented an above and below standard. In this case, all of the students you're going to see here are students who are above standard. But these are the males and these are the females. So in this case, in writing, the percentage of boys who met standard is 70%. The percentage of girls who met standard in writing is 82%. Why do I have that gap? And does that mean that I should have some focused instruction, focused resources for that population there? And I can take a look at any piece of demographic data and disaggregate that way. As we mentioned, you can go and you can place students in student groups based on a specific criteria on a test. And in this case, what we've done is we have students in a targeted group called grade 4. So in order to get into this group, you're a student who has done poorly on a number of assessments. These are the research-based strategies that we know work. They're very similar to what you have here in Wareham. So these are small group instruction, it's do the math, it's LLI, level literacy. We know that those are specific research-based strategies that will assist students who need that support. So I can add those to a student's record here, and if I wanted to, I could click on a student. So I've gone from the big picture, the district, to the school, to the class, and now I'm on the student. You all care about that big number. 82% of the students met standard. That's your number. Mrs. Smith, the teacher, cares about Johnny Jones. And she wants to know, how does Johnny do over time on reading, writing, math assessments, and what is it that I need to do to help Johnny do better? That's what Mrs. Smith cares about. And so, Mrs. Smith can assign Johnny into what's called an AIP, or an academic improvement plan. And in that academic improvement plan, this is all of the student data. I'm going to scroll all the way down. And on the bottom, which you can't see, says this student was in a grade 3 and grade 4 targeted student because of specific data. We put the student in this particular intervention, level literacy, because we know it's an assistance for students who are below the bar in reading. And then we have a variety of comments that the teacher has put in. These comments follow the student all the way through the record so that subsequent teachers know where were the weaknesses, what strategies helped, and what did we do to make sure the student was being supported all the way through. And so we honor the work of the teacher in the classroom who's recognizing Johnny needs extra help, and we're making sure that subsequent teachers know what's going to work. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop there and pause for any questions, and I want to show you your version of Inform without showing you student names. Okay? Questions?
And take a breath.
Okay. I had 7 cups of coffee at dinner.
We could tell.
And he's going to drive back to Farmington, Connecticut in about a minute now.
Committee, any questions?
I have one.
Yes, go ahead.
And I think this is really for you, Mr. Lazan. The question that I had when I went to the MCAS results workshop, one of the things that was brought up was that the state doesn't give us all the data about students. And the information and the data just specifically around MCAS that's going into the system, does it include every single one of the questions, how it was answered? Does it include everything? Or did we only upload a portion of it that the state would give us?
So the MCAS was a challenge, is a challenge for Pearson because of the way that it's set up. But it is really tied to the standards in terms of how that information will be presented and informed. Our interest would be what standards are those students having difficulty with? And not only in the MCAS, but how does that relate to some of the other instruments that are used? So for example, Dibbles Next and grade. When somebody has a problem with a particular skill on MCAS, is that following through not only in the periodic assessments like grade and Dibbles, which is done a few times a year, but also in the grade report, you'll see that there is also the students' grades come over. So it's looking at their individual grades by quarter, it's looking at the formative assessments, it's looking at the progress monitoring as we put those tools in, along with how they did on particular standards in MCAS.
So I can comment also on something that Bob just commented on. For example, we take a look at our state tests and we compare that with our own local assessments to see if we're in line. And what we have found out upon occasion is that our students are performing here on our state test, but it's reported that they're performing way up here on our local assessment. That can't happen. You can't have a 30% gap. Something is wrong. Something is wrong with the assessment that we're giving, or something is wrong with the way that assessment is being delivered. It's that ability to match the targeted students up, the cohorts up, and look at various assessments over time, because what we all know is one assessment is not what makes or breaks a student's ability, knowledge, and skills. But when you begin to look at patterns over time and through multiple assessments, you begin to have a clearer assessment package. And we take a look at that. And you can do that down to the standard level. Inform also does have the ability to allow item analysis. So you can, if you have the data from the state tests or even your local assessments, you can look at it by question, and you can look at which disaggregator or choice students chose most often. So you know what your next teaching point should be now. If all students choose C and that's the incorrect answer, there's a sense of what their misunderstanding is. In your system now, and I'm not going to click on any bars because we would show student names. I just want you to understand that. But this is your grade 1 Dibbles from the beginning of the year to the next year. So if you from the beginning of this year to the middle of this year. So again, you begin to look at this and you say, all right, we're making some slow and steady progress here. From the instructional level, from the district level, you can take a look here and you can look at it at the district level. Principals are interested in looking at that at their school level. And teachers are interested in looking at that in their class level. And once they get to their class level, the students who are not making progress, they can take a look and they can put them into a targeted group and discuss with either reading specialists, math specialists, whatever the appropriate test is, what is, at this point in the year, the best instructional strategy to support these students who are still in the red bar, who still are not meeting standard in essence. Additionally here, you'll see that
I like your graphs in your dummy data. Better than the graphs that just showed up there.
it's dummy data, yeah.
I like those graphs better.
So you've got your intervention strategies that your team has already put together here. These are things that you're already doing to ensure that those students are supported. And what you would need to know about these strategies, these are research-based strategies. You just don't put in to this group, we're doing small group discussion. What you've got is Wilson Reading. It's a research-based strategy that we know helps kids and supports kids. We haven't assigned kids yet. That's the next level of work that we're getting to here based on the kids in the red bar. So the big picture of Inform is that you're able to look at a variety of people, the district, the school, the classroom level, to look at information about students and decide, number one, is there an instructional issue? Is it a curriculum issue? Is it an assessment issue? But on the student level, it gives you the ability to look at patterns for the student, to see where the strengths and weaknesses are on the student's entire history of all of the assessments that are in there. And you have a wide variety of assessments in your district that you can use, and then to create an instructional plan to support the neediest students, the neediest readers, the neediest mathematicians in your school, to offer them support while at the same time examining your overall program of instruction, curriculum development, and assessment practice. And that's where you are with Inform right now.
Take a breath, please.
Yes.
Ken?
Who's minding the store? There's a lot of data here that naturally the teachers have to input, and I assume Mr. Luzon is looking at that. How much work is actually going into this is not gonna work if they're not doing the inputs, correct?
So, well, no, what we will be doing, so we've put in Terry and Elise from Jan's office have put in the data that we have there so far. Our next steps, and I was going to talk at the end about next steps, our next steps are, one step, for example, is to have a common input template, so the instructional leaders gather the information from their schools, and that common template will allow us to quickly put the information in. As we are today, it would be Terry or Elise that would actually input the data. The key is to have it in a common format so that all of the data looks the same. And so that is one of our next steps. You saw a fairly small list of intervention strategies. In our next steps, we need to be able to expand that list of intervention strategies, because this tool and what you have in front of you, the Academic Improvement Plan, or the AIP, really is a tool for us to be able to use. So if somebody is having difficulty with a specific skill, that document becomes the tool that perhaps the teacher uses in a parent conference. It may be the instructional leaders tool in discussing with a third grade group, what interventions, what kinds of instruction we seem to be lacking in, and what we need to work differently on, give more time to, and those sorts of things. So next steps include the intervention strategies. It includes getting a common template for the input of data, but this is not pulling the teachers away from instruction to do it. That's very much why we designed the training, so that the instructional leaders really had the most training on Inform, because they're the ones that are going to be using it along with the principals. And we also designed it so that the last day was the principals sitting with their instructional leaders to talk about, beginning to have the conversations about how they're going to use Inform in their classes, their buildings. Right?
So maybe I got ahead of myself. That was my concern, is that if teachers were responsible for inputting all of this data, is that taking away from their classroom
Right.
time? Because this is a lot of information that's going in here, and I assume that you feel this is a major improvement over the way we do things now.
Well, just one example of that, Ken, is this is the first time when we had our teachers training on the 13th and the 14th. One of the common things that we heard back from the teachers was that it's really the first time that they have immediately had the information in front of them. They have had Power School for a very long time. It gives them certain bits of information, such as grades and attendance and discipline. This is the first time that they have, at the teacher level, they have the data to be able to make those comparisons and adjust their instruction with. So I think in that reason it's very useful. I think if Ted were to, right now, for example, you're looking at Wareham School District's responses to the Dibbles Next for first grade. He just has to click a button that brings that down to, if I want to look at Minot as opposed to the districts, I can simply go down to the Minot Elementary School and look at their scores on those two tests as opposed to the district. The next level, just another click of the mouse, is looking at particular teachers at a first grade level, for example, one class versus another. So at the administrators level, the principals level, there's a lot of information there very quickly that they can say, okay, it looks like there are 5 kids who didn't get that last concept. Who are they? It's a quick click to be able to identify who those 5 kids are, so that you can, let's say at a third grade level meeting, be able to say, okay, these are the 5 kids that we really need to work more on this specific skill.
Cliff?
I've got a couple of concerns and one question. and this is strange for me, because when we first got the presentation, I voted for this. And I'm the technical idiot. But I did see the benefit in going this way because of what Bob just said, the immediacy of the information and how we use it. But I think a couple of things, it was contingent on a couple of things, and I'm not sure that we're at where we need to be in terms of the foundation. One of the things was formative common assessments. I don't know where we are on that. I would think that that would be one of those foundation kind of things that have to be developed and in place before we're going to get the real benefit out of this. So where are we on the common formative assessments?
Let me answer that.
But that's the
Cliff, if I
first
can.
question. You want the second one, or you want me to wait till he answers the first one? All right, do the
Okay.
first one.
So, where we are on benchmark tests for those formative assessments is in the elementary school, the new math series that we have the formative assessments built into the curriculum. So they are there. Our English curriculum, which is still developing, language arts, by the end of the summer, we will have those benchmark exams. That's the extra data that now, with the ILs trained into make sure that it comes out in the same format, they'll be able to put in. But I wanted to just make sure people understand. Inform is a tool that came about because looking at response to intervention, we needed a way to assess how students were doing. This allows a group of teachers, a team of 2 teachers who have maybe 40 children, to sit down and to quickly find out which children need which skills to be enhanced. It also keeps track of what things we've tried with them as far as interventions. So it is, in the old days, we all did it by paper. This does it online and right up the chain, from all the way down from the teacher level all the way up to the superintendent's level. You can look at the data and make some assumptions, and the more data we have the more years, the patterns we will be able to see, which will give us even more information. So we're at the beginning. We've done a lot in the time that we have, but all of this is related, as you just said, Cliff. The curriculum, response to intervention, and Inform, and Power School, because one of the other things this thing does, it also shows the end-of-the-year grades as another data set in here as well. So you can look at the grades, their MCAS scores, and see, in fact, how the children are performing. Are they performing at the level you would expect from their end-of-course grades or not? So, that's just some of the information.
If I could just add to that, one of the advantages to having Ted working with us or working with Terry really is that here are 2 colleagues that are both in Power School districts, and both districts using Inform. Ted's district using it for a much longer period of time, and certainly that's allowed us to avoid some of the bugs that I'm sure drove him crazy in his first year or 2 of applying Inform.
My second question, I didn't have it originally, but something that Ted said that kind of jogged my concern is it's all about capacity. And, we're in the middle of a budget fight right now. We don't know where we're going to go in terms of the budget, the bottom line, what we're going to have for cuts and so forth. So it has to do with capacity. Now, you put out one of our intervention strategies is going to be Wilson reading. Now, you have a little man in the back of my head says, are we going to have the capacity to do Wilson the way it's supposed to be done? Because that's very small groups, that's highly trained instructors, and do we have the capacity right now to use Wilson as a strategy?
We do, but one of the things we need to be selective about is that Wilson, like some other strategies, are the ones that you would use for what we would call Tier 3. So Tier 1, the classroom instruction, Tier 2, that extra support. Tier 3 for those kids who, despite those things, are really struggling, but we don't necessarily need to have them on an IEP. We need to give them 6 to 8 weeks or even 12 weeks of a specific strategy to resolve that targeted problem that they have. So, yes, Wilson is there, but it's not like we're gonna be giving away, you know, and it's not good for the kids to have them in those kinds of groups unless they have really demonstrated that they, despite the other interventions that have been tried, just are not making it. But we don't, and this is the difference, that doesn't mean we now need to put that child on an IEP in order for them to get.
No, I understand, and it's not in lieu of an IEP, I mean, it kind of is in lieu of an IEP, but the point that I'm trying to make is, hypothetically, and I'm gonna really put you on the spot now, let's assume that we had 12 third graders that really should be having Wilson. Do we have the capacity to do that?
I would say that we would have the capacity to do that.
Fully trained Wilson instructors?
I mean, I'm scanning the people who are Wilson trained at this time.
All right.
I would say that I think that.
That's what I mean by capacity.
Right,
So,
right.
and it
Right.
scares me,
Right.
especially in the middle of a budget crunch.
And part of our plan has been, and it has already started, and that is that some of the special education teachers' schedule is devoted to Tier 3 interventions. So those people who are otherwise trained as special education teachers are going to utilize those skills.
This is where I'm at in terms of academics. I support it. I supported it when we voted it. But it really does scare me because you know as well as I do, it's limited resources. And when we start something like this and we put our energy and our training and we know that we're going to reap the benefits from it, all right? That little person in the back of my head says, yeah, but will we have the capacity to see it through, to see it come to complete fruition? And that just scares me because just like a lot of things that we've done in the past, there were great ideas when they started, and then we just haven't had the capacity. We've dropped programs, you know, like Patriots receivers drop the balls in the Super Bowl. But that's true.
Could we stay on topic, please?
I know.
I like that.
We've had great programs, and it's not just in terms of academic support, but extracurricular, co-curricular, arts, and they go by the wayside. So that's the thing that scares me. I want to see this thing work. I want to see us to have utility from it, and I want it to see completely implemented so that we can really take the benefit of what it can do, its capacity. Thank you.
The list of strategies that are in there, as Bob said, you know, it's a tiered structure. I'm sure you know about that with RTI.
Right.
And those strategies are your district strategies. Those strategies aren't coming from someplace else. Those are district strategies.
No, I understood that.
Great.
I did understand.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Looking at that graph, just the orange graph represents needs improvement or unsatisfactory, and the green represents proficient and exceed standards.
That's correct. That's correct. And
On that specific test, the
so-
DIBELS.
This is the DIBELS, and then this is the DIBELS skills. So we drilled down so you could see where is the weakness. So in this case, the greatest weakness in this term was nonsense word fluency in the overall test.
Okay, thank you. I must say that my immediate reaction, and don't take this so much as criticism as just a gut emotional reaction, was when you talked about, well, we can discover whether it's instruction, curriculum, or assessment. I thought to myself, well, let's see, if we were talking about machine tools, it's manufacturing design or the measurement of tolerances, et cetera. I don't think there's a teacher, I've learned enough to be dangerous about education, I don't think there's a teacher in this system who wouldn't say, even from kindergarten on, there are kids show up literally well prepared to be educated or not even close to being ready to be educated, and yet there they are in front of them, you know, to be educated. And what I'm seeing is an emphasis on absolute measurements of proficiency as compared to growth in proficiency. Can you give me a comfort level
Sure.
that we can do both?
You can do both. In fact, without taking a ton of time, those reports that I just showed you are built right here. And so there's a number of questions which you probably can't see. I can look at a student performance summary. Those were all student performance summaries, the absolute as you described it. I can look at a distribution of student scores. So on a scale score on your state test of 0 to 400, you can see where the cusp kids are and what you need to do to pump them up or keep them there. But further down, there's one called student performance gains. So I can take a look at a base test and then the target test, and I can take a look at the students who were below the bar in the base test, and I can look at just those students and see how have those students improved over time in the target test. So I can look at student gains as measured against, in essence, a pre-test and a post-test. And I can begin to take a look at that. So then I can begin to take a look, if these students were in a specific intervention, did they gain, did their achievement go up, the students who were below the bar? On the same token, I can take a look at the target, at the base test of the students who met standard first, and did I lose any students along the way? So by measuring those pieces and looking that way, I get to the issue that you're talking about.
So Bob, you know we're mandated to use SGPs. I want to be able to use the equivalent of the SGP within the district on the things, on the assessments that we're internally generating or perhaps purchasing separate and distinct. Just to be clear, see, personally, that's to me is the critical thing that I will be looking for. Thank you. Please continue.
Okay. I'm really done. In terms of the big picture here, I think, the purpose tonight was to show you that you have started, let me go here, sorry. So that we started putting tests in. This is all of your dibbles. Terry's working. She's coming to a workshop with me that we're going to look and putting in more data, some more local data that we've worked on tonight. And so again, the big picture data, the district data, right, or the state data, right down to the district data, the common formative assessments, as those get done, those end up going in here in a thoughtful way. And it is the decision of Bob's office and curriculum people, what are the important assessments that get collected so that they can be compared and looked at, compared both performance, longitudinally, and from the district down to the student level.
Just quickly, to Ken's earlier point, data entry is not only a burden, it's also a time for errors. What kind of error checking capacity do we have for that area?
So when you set up a database, you can put in the selections that are available to teachers. So you don't say put in anything. You say you can put in a 1, 2, 3, or 4, or you can put, and then you create a report so teachers check their own data. They're putting data into your system now. They're putting in their standards reports, those grades. Is that correct?
Well, they put those into
Power School. So they put them into Power School, and Terry is working on, that's what she's learned here, how to move them over. So the data checking is built into the database that Terry's built in terms of how you build the assessments, how you build a grade format for teachers to put in, and so they can't put in everything, it's built into there. So that's an ongoing issue always with data, and I face that all the time in my district with my teachers.
If I could add to
Yep.
that, perfect example today, Elise and I were working on importing the grade 2 DIBBLE scores. It gives you a kick-out file, so it'll tell you how many records were imported successfully, how many errors there were, and then you go back and look at those errors. We had only 7 kids that took grade 2 DIBBLEs when we looked at Inform, so we knew that obviously something was wrong because there are many more than 7 students. We were able to go look at that kick-out file, and the issue was in our import file. It wasn't in the data entry, so we were quickly able to correct that and re-import it. So it does have safeguards to not allow dirty data in there.
Thank you. Bob, Terry, are you guys all set as well?
Yes, I think I just would say that, at the end of the 2 days of training, the 13th and the 14th, we sat with the principals and the instructional leaders and said, okay, what are your concerns? What are the next steps that you see as necessary? And those are really the things that are going to drive what our plans are for the rest of the spring as well as into next year around specific trainings. That document that you have, that academic improvement plan, how are we going to use that? What's the best way to? So we have Teacher Assistance Council, for example, that takes kids who are struggling and a group of people sit down and say, okay, what do we need to do to intervene right away? That will probably be a document for that. There are a number of uses for these things that we now need to apply now that we've got the data in and the formats are in place. Data entry is certainly one. Being timely about data entry. It's not going to do anybody any good if we are 2 months down the road when we get a set of data in. We need to have a way to do that effectively. And, those are the things that we're addressing next.
Any final questions from the committee?
I have just a couple. The asset to the system is the data, but we also know that data can sometimes be dangerous. It's positive, but then also, depending on what you do with it, it could sometimes, make you manic. What protections are we put in place so then we're not using this system and being reactive? So every single year it's something else, and making sure that we're very thoughtful on what we do with this information, with the interventionists and the teachers and what we're going to be doing for them. That is, I love the system to be able to now. I feel like it's replacing. For some of the teachers out there, Excel spreadsheets that they have the data and then they're going in and doing their own. They no longer have to do that, so I see this as a time saving for the teachers. But I think it's very, very important of what we do with this, and that there's a long-term strategy, not just a yearly, again, being reactive. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that piece.
Well, I can start about as far as what I see for us, and Ted probably has lots of ideas about that after being an Inform user for multiple years, but I think the two things that come to mind are that the real advantage, one of the real advantages with Inform is that it's putting more than one data set together and looking at all of those. So I would much rather be looking at Dibble's grade and MCAS, for example. Dibble's grade, MCAS in the benchmarks, and be able to say, okay, what decisions are we going to make based on multiple sets of data rather than one individual data set, and it's all in one place. I think the second thing is that with the work of the instructional leaders, this is really going to be a tool that allows them to be able to sit down with, again, I'll use the example of a third grade team, and say, look, let's talk about the OA sounds, or let's talk about, as Ted showed, the nonsense words that set of scores were down. Well, what does that test? What it tests is really phonetic ability. If nonsense words are used so that people can't memorize particular words. So as a third grade team with an instructional leader leading that team to say, look, we're really doing poorly on this particular set of nonsense words that have a CVC, consonant vowel consonant sound, or CVC silent E, or whatever it may be. What do we need to do in, for example, the pacing of curriculum, that maybe we need to spend additional time on that particular skill because we have a cluster of kids that clearly are not getting it with the amount of time we're devoting to it now. So I think that the team concept of a group of people with an instructional leader leading those discussions is very much a safeguard. And I think secondly, the multiple sets of information are much, much more valuable than individual sets. And to have it all in one place, that was universally when I asked about the strengths that people perceived after the 2 days of training. The fact that there were multiple years of information and multiple users and multiple sources as the real things that people said, this part of it is particularly good. So I don't know, Ted, have you?
I think just to reinforce that, you triangulate the data, you have multiple sources, and you triangulate the people who are at the conversation. You have the teachers, the instructional leaders, and possibly a district curriculum person who's having a conversation. And then if you see, as we saw, our system is K4, then we have a 5-6. We saw a dip in that very important reading score we give in the 4. Well, everybody panicked. Well, let's wait another year, because we just opened this 5-6 school. Do we see it again? Well, in fact, we see a dip every year when the kids go from 4th to 5th grade, and then we see them get stronger. So we didn't panic about it because we were thoughtful about it, and we were thoughtful about it because we had multiple people at the table for the conversation. And Bob has done some great work with his team on, looking at the graphs is simply weighing the pig. That's all that is. Our job in education is to fatten the pig, right? That's our job. You fatten the pig through the conversation, and that's the sort of the level of work that Bob and his team have done. Let's have the conversation about the data and see what we're going to do to change that.
So I just have one last question. You know that I'm going to take a look at any SMART goal and probably have a comment on it. So the SMART goal, huge fan of that because it's really about how we're going to use this system to do better intervention or learning in the classrooms. But the measurement, and I know that the goals, the indicators this year is just all around training for the spring. But in addition to feedback to presenters by participant, I know that's very, very useful to get the feedback from the people that are taking the training, but I would like to see more measurement around even an initial document or a preliminary document about rollout, because you are getting all this information back. So the rollout strategy, as well as I'm going to call it the interventionist plan, but I don't know if that's the right term, but going to what we were talking about a little bit before about how are you going to use this data, any information that you're thinking of right now, being able to put that into a plan that's part of this initial training. So it's not just about the training, we're presenting something at the end of the training.
But I also think if you read the top line, it is that this was about the training that was going to occur this spring. This isn't the whole package. This is our first phase of what we were going to do, and I really want to also say that I think with the amount of data that was put into Inform, in the trainings and people needing to be able to be in the same room at the same time and have, I think, very good conversations, particularly at the end of that second day. We trained a lot of people, and I think we excited a lot of teachers about their ability to be able to have this data and make their decisions with data rather than, those spreadsheets, as somebody has said. So as a first phase, that's why I am a big fan of SMART goals as well, but I also realize that SMART goals, the A in SMART is attainable. This was a SMART goal, and we had an attainable goal of making it happen. I believe we made it happen.
I'll just say one last thing about it. I think that you have, there was a lot of information tonight around the next steps, and I think that's all I'm looking for. So then, we're seeing what the next phase of this will be as an output from this piece of it.
Yeah. Okay. As a next step.
Yep. Thank you.
Ken, Cliff, all set?
All set?
The only final question I'd have is, when would you envision the next time this committee would have an informed presentation?
I think that probably late fall. I'm thinking of when certain tests are given, when, as Dr. Rabinovich said, that there's work being done on the benchmarks, but to be able to show those in place, to be able to have a second set of data this year's MCAS
would be in the
scores.
fall as well.
Okay,
So I would say late October, November.
Yeah,
thank you.
should-
Ted, thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here. Thank you, Terry.
Terry.
Thank you, Bob. We'll go back to item 4 on the agenda. School committee reports, starting with the Policy Review Committee. Rhonda.
Thank you. The committee was able to come together and I think make a lot of progress. We have been behind with policies that are being added. I think Michelle is probably happy that we were able to get through four policies, and those are in front of you today. I want to thank Cliff for all of his work on this also. So the first policy that I want you to review is the policy and regulations governing use of facilities. This was old business for us because we did ask that this goes back to the administrators to take a look and provide their recommendations. The committee did add or suggest additional changes to this. And I would say generally what they were about was to really at the building level and the superintendent level decide on when a custodian is used. Dr. Brenner, is that generally?
Absolutely. Just looking at, number 5, where it says when deemed necessary by the superintendent or designee. Or number 6, it also says is required at the discretion of the principal and the superintendent. And this was amended, I think, and updated to take care of those gray areas and to make it more explicit about when custodians need to be present and not.
Questions from the committee on the policy and regulations governing use of facilities? When you, on the application for the use of grounds, which is the 4th page, double-sided, when you've deleted, including but not limited to custodial services, I get the feeling you deleted it because it may not always be included. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, as well as if you take a look at the fee schedule, there are several things that are listed on there. So the use of AV equipment, the use of, custodian is on there. We didn't feel it necessary to have it part of the form because there are several things that someone might or might not be charged for, and that is covered in the fee schedule.
True, but is it fair to say that the custodial services would be the biggest add-on if that was something that was charged? My only concern, although I understand the rationale in deleting it, is that you want to make sure that people aren't surprised by the costs associated with renting the facilities.
Mr. Chair, if I might, the procedure is that when somebody fills out one of these forms to use it, we then fill out the charges, and we call them, or we give them a copy of it before, so they have the right of refusal, so to speak.
So there are no
they know-
surprises.
Exactly.
Fine.
They know beforehand, so
Okay.
there are no surprises.
Okay. I'll take a motion on the policy.
So
governing-
moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 400. Next.
The next policy that I'll have you look at is the network acceptable use policy. Mr. Chair, you asked for this to be brought in front of the committee again based on a community member having concerns about the use of cell phones or of technology in the school system. We took a look at the policy, and there was one addition that we think covers, I think, general concerns about the network acceptable use. And what that was is that we added in that as all users, including students, teachers, administrators, parents, and guests, are covered by this policy as well as any other relevant policies and are expected to be familiar with their provisions. The reason we had a discussion about all of the policies that are currently in the policy handbook and things that are covered in there, like harassment, bullying, and we felt adding that line made it clear that there are other relevant policies. Like this policy doesn't go into detail about using technology for your own use to bully someone or to harass, and so we thought that adding that basically said that there are other policies that also would be relevant to this policy.
Any questions from the committee? My concern was the degree to which technology and specifically social media websites actually enhance a bully's individual ability to be successful. That was my concern, and I think it's fair to say that was the grandparents' concern who expressed it to me back, I guess it was in the fall. And I'm not sure what we have done with the review of this policy to give that individual, or myself for that matter, any increased comfort.
How I would respond to that is that we do have other relevant policies that cover that. We do have a bullying policy. We have a bullying manual and a harassment manual, and that's where it's covered.
I don't think I'm making myself clear. You can have 1,000 anti-bullying policies, but if you have a lot of hammers hanging around a building, it's quite likely someone's going to pick one up and use it, and perhaps not the way you want it. So to the degree that we have things that make it easier to bully, especially inside the building, we increase the likelihood that bullying is going to occur. You see my point? It's not about policies. It's about the infrastructure that exists that makes it easier to bully.
If I may, this is about the network, and
And the use of the network.
yes, but almost, and I don't know how far to go with this, but almost all of our students have some sort of phone that has its own 3G connection. They don't use our network. They can go to their social media site while they're in a stall in a restroom and do what you're saying is being done. And we have no control over it because we allow students, if I remember the complaint or the concern, it was that we were allowing students to use their tablets or cell phones at lunch. And the school administration from the high school has said, since we have allowed that, the use of those devices in classes is markedly down. The confrontations between instructors or deans saying to students, give me your phone because you have it out in class, is markedly down because we are treating them like young adults and allowing them during their 20-minute lunch to be on their social network. Now, if somebody reports that it was used inappropriately, we would use the other policies to go and deal with it as we have. Officer Baptiste went to somebody's house just yesterday to have somebody take down something off of a YouTube that didn't belong there. So, we do find out these things and we deal with them as they come up. But,
This grandparent's concern was not the cell phone.
okay.
And I'm pleased to hear that the experiment we tried with respect to the use of cell phones during lunch periods, et cetera, has been effective. This grandparent's concern was the ability to go on Facebook in a computer lab and harass another student during school time with school machines. Jessica, do you have any thoughts on this issue?
Personally, from experience, when I see students going on Facebook for, when a teacher brings their class down to use the computer lab, it is to go into their messages and then copy over something that pertains to the class. So if they're writing an essay, maybe getting their sources, something like that, so they can, if they haven't written them down, because we're required to use online sources, and it's easier if you're online looking them up, to instead of copying the whole entire URL, to just paste it into your Facebook account and then bring it up. So and the majority of them, the computers are faced towards the wall, so the teachers are able to see if you're going on them and what you're going on them for. I personally haven't seen that as an issue. Maybe I haven't noticed it, but I haven't seen it as an issue.
And you haven't had your fellow students complain to you about
No,
the whole
I
issue?
personally have not.
I feel like I'm in the distinct minority on this issue.
I can't say it doesn't go on. I don't know if it does. I just haven't heard about it.
Okay.
When we rewrote this, not this time, but the time before that, which wasn't that long ago, we put in this part about responsibilities that the educator who's with that class has a responsibility, and if they aren't living up to it, then the administrator has a responsibility. So, like most things, if something has occurred in a class, if somebody communicates with the school administration, I'm more than sure that they will act on it.
And in the student responsibilities you have, if a student is misusing the school system, or misusing the system, an administrator has the right to question the user and discipline
Yep.
said user as a school community academic issue as outlined in the Wareham School District's handbook.
Any further discussion on network acceptable use? Yes, good.
One quick comment is, and this is just my own experience, believe it or not, I had a tremendous input in designing 2 of those computer labs at the high school in 1991.
91?
91. That's when those rooms were designed.
Wow.
And it was designed specifically so that the teacher could view every screen. So if you go into those computer labs now and you're sitting at the teacher station, with one quick glance, the teacher can do a panoramic view and see every computer screen. Now, am I saying that they're gonna be able to know with any foolproof measure of certainty what's going on there? Probably not. But if they see something that is suspect, they certainly can mosey on over and take a look at it. So I do know that those computer labs were designed specifically that the computer screens were visible to the teacher. I move we accept.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? 3-0-0. Next.
Distribution.
I'm sorry, do you would like to reconsider that vote, wait till Kenny gets back?
If
He's
Kenny,
obviously-
if Kenny would like us to, I'll be happy to.
All right.
Do you want me to continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. The next policy is distribution of condoms. There were no changes to the policy as it is written right now.
It would appear that brevity was the soul of wit on this policy.
I can honestly say that this is the shortest
Yes.
policy we have.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And there is no wit involved with this.
No.
The Wareham Public Schools does not, in any way, allow prophylactic distribution, period.
I move we accept.
Do I have a second?
Second. For,
Discussion.
second.
Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 3-0-0. Thank you.
The last one is parental notification relative to sex education. There was a lot of discussion around timing. I mean, there are some grammatical changes, but the biggest conversation had to do was around notification, and you'll see in the last paragraph that we deleted, preferably within 2 weeks of the request. And the comment there was, so the student or designee will review the issue and give the parent guardian a timely written decision. And in this policy, we basically said 2 weeks. There was conversation that 2 weeks, and then also for the school committee, it gave 4 weeks. And there was a lot of conversation around that's too long, to the flip side, which is we have it generally for all of our policies whenever it talks about getting back to someone, whether it's an administrator or a teacher or a parent or a student, that it's consistent that it says timely, and that there's a general rule of what timely means. So we debated a lot about whether it should go from 2 weeks to 1 week or 3 days, and we got caught up in this conversation about really what that 2 weeks and 4 weeks should actually mean. And it was then the consensus of the committee that we should just leave it as just timely, because again, that goes to every single policy in there. The last thing I'll say about this is that there were 2 that did not approve this policy. I was one of them because I wanted to delete that whole entire sentence around whether if someone is dissatisfied with the decision, because again, across the board, we do have a procedure in place of when a parent is dissatisfied with a decision, that there's protocol that's followed. And
Would you be clear about which sentence you wanted to delete?
the whole last paragraph, well, except for the last sentence. So a parent guardian who is dissatisfied with the decision of the principal concerning notice or access, that whole area that even talks about, you have a concern, you need to write that to the superintendent, then the superintendent needs to get back to you in 2 weeks, and then the school committee gets back. Just that there's already a I don't know if I'll call it grievance, but there's already a procedure in place of when we get back. And so if it's again, the committee decided to leave that in, but delete the timeline of when you need to get back to them, and that it's just timely.
Okay. Any questions about the parental notification relative to sex education?
Move accept.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Ken, in your absence, we voted to approve both the network acceptable use policy and the distribution of condom policy. Do you have any wish for us to go back to them?
No, I would have voted affirmative.
Okay. Is that it, Rhonda?
That is.
Thank you very much to both you and Cliff.
And to the committee.
And to the committee, yes, thank you. It's a large, important committee. Okay. Next on the agenda is item number 5, Superintendent's Report.
No, you still have 2 more
we have
committee
Oh, I'm
reports.
sorry.
In
Yes, I
action.
do. Designers Selection Committee Master Plan Study. Barry.
Okay, in the newsletter that you have, that I've buried on my desk here below things, you have a short thing from me saying that the Designer Selection Committee has met 3 times. First time was to talk about the process. The second time was to go through all of the not projects, or all of the proposals from various architects that wanted to do the study. We then had an interview night where we interviewed 2 different architectural firms, and we decided on offering it to the company that worked in designing this building, SMMA. But where we are at the point is putting together a contract and a price, and so I'm kind of informing you of it, and at the next meeting, we'll come forward with asking the school committee to accept the bid proposal, but I'll have a copy of the contract and the scope of work with that I don't have at this moment. But I will pass this out, anybody that's interested in looking at the proposal from SMMA that was the winner of the design selection.
For mine.
Nope.
No,
This
for
is
the-
for the master plan, which was to look at all of our buildings,
Yeah, okay.
to talk to us about space needs and what work needs to be done on the facilities as far as order. Basically, it's a 10-year plan for your facilities management as well as space needs. So that was Designer Selection Committee report.
Ken?
I just want to know if that can be scanned and sent electronically, rather than just glance at it tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And a printed copy for my colleague.
Yes, I have lots of them sitting in my office, so we'll make sure he gets a printed copy.
So this isn't the only copy?
No, I have multiple
Multiple
copies.
copies,
So
okay.
I may be able to give you each your own.
Okay,
I'll have a copy of this.
great. Thank you. And if they're just going to be thrown into storage somewhere, you might as well give,
Absolutely, out of my desk onto yours.
that's what I thought. Right. But I think Ken's point is well taken, because at some point, I'm going to want to toss mine, but keep a record of it.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. And then finally, we have, under school committee reports, the action committee as it relates to transportation. I'm going to save most of my remarks about transportation when we get to the fiscal year 13 budget discussion. I think I will say this about the committee. We have met, I think, 5 times. We have been unable to resolve any issue on any agenda. The issues of privatization versus remaining part of the town departments, the school department, was tabled and unresolved. The issue of how to fund transportation, whether it was to be privatized or not, was unresolved. There was one motion that was made as it related to funding, which did not pass. So despite the best efforts of all involved in the committee, we were unable to achieve any resolution. We have agreed to meet when the town administrator is prepared to present his summary of the information he is attempting to glean from his colleagues with respect to the issue of privatization versus staying within a town's departments. So unfortunately, I don't have anything to indicate that anything productive has been achieved. But we will be meeting again, and I will report as appropriate at that time. No, you're not, I'm not taking any questions.
Oh,
Not-
yes.
Well, I'm
No,
not,
we can question your report, can't we?
well, you have to do it, before you can do it, you have to remove the smirk on your face.
No.
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 We have
If you
to question your report.
If you can't question without a smirk, I'm not allowing it.
Can I question the name of the committee?
Mr. Fonce, I appreciate the serious look on your face. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, through 5 meetings, it sounds like you're still at day 1 with this committee. This was talked about a long time ago at our meetings was, is this a waste of time or did anything good come out of this? And right now, it sounds like I haven't seen any progress out of the committee, so what is the intent of the next meeting? That's my question is, based on your report, 5 meetings, nothing has been accomplished in this committee. It's, to me, it's like what we had a year and a half ago.
This isn't an offer to take my place on the committee, is it?
Absolutely not. Been there, done that. I'm just concerned that we're at wit's end right now.
I will talk more about that issue, as I said, later in the agenda.
Fair enough.
Dr. Sylvia, would you like to
gonna-
add to Mr. Fonce's comments?
Well, you're gonna talk more about this later?
Not the action committee, but transportation.
Well, I guess my question is this. And this is just for my information as a board member. And I'm not gonna be fresh.
Thank you. Jessica,
Yes.
you have,
No.
you have a foot, right? Use it appropriately.
But I know there was some insinuations at the OPL that for some reason, there is a perception out there that the school committee is not working hand in hand with the town fathers or other people in the community. Well, from my recollection, this is the second such committee that has functioned, and we're no further with this committee than we were with the first committee. Well, at least the first committee got us a transportation director. Was there any discussion at all about the safety aspect of the buses? Because that seemed to be a hot issue at the OPL, to the point where we were accused of leaving kids on buses, but yet no one knew that the person responsible for that got fired. Has there been any discussion about this outrage that was expressed at OPL about the safety of the buses?
No.
So, basically, the safety of the buses are not coming up. It's all about coming up with a decision on whether to privatize or keep it in-house, and that hasn't been made yet.
And in either case, how to fund it.
Well, I can honestly say that we've made every single attempt as a committee, and I'm just speaking for myself, to be transparent on this issue. And we are no farther along than we were when I was chairman of the committee, which is 2 chairmans ago. No further along. That's pretty sad. Thank you.
Would you like to add to the comments so far?
Pile on, as you
Pile
will.
on is a
the,
term that comes to mind?
this has always been a budget issue. And to me, the way that we're going to have additional action is by addressing this through the budget. We need to figure out how we are going to replace our aging bus fleet. That is the issue, and that is what we have to take care of going into town meeting and this budget year. We have to address it through the budget. We can continue to talk about it, but if we don't address it in this budget cycle, then we're going to have to take we're going to have to make major decisions that are going to not be too pleasant for the citizens and to the parents, and it's unfortunate.
Dr. Rabinovich, Superintendent's report.
I'm going to move right into my budget discussion, which I have a presentation that will elicit conversation, I believe.
Fine. While that's being set up, I thought it would be
Everybody
appropriate to set this up by
a copy of this
letting people know that a very conservative but very major national publication, the Wall Street Journal, literally, I believe it was today, it could have been yesterday, announced that the uneven distribution of resources for public education is, in its view, a national security issue. I think it's quite remarkable when the Wall Street Journal views the fact that Wareham and many other communities does not have sufficient resources to do what it's trying to do for the children of this community and many others is a national security issue. So with that context, Dr. Rabinovich, would you like me to start with non-net, or are you going to be ready shortly?
I hope I'm going to be, I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute.
Man, am I being good?
You risk Dr. Sylvia making another cogent comment.
No, I'm being good.
He doesn't even have to make the comment anymore.
I'm being good.
Everybody knows what he would say.
Do you want to hand this down?
Yes, thank you. I think. What was it about? Yes, I did. Thank you. I've got them.
You have a computer? Fred Flintstone?
Yes, it's a hammer and chisel.
Dr. Sylvia will focus his attention on net school spending. Following that, I will have some comments to make about transportation or non-net school spending. Dr. Rabinovich, my apologies.
Is there a doctor in the house?
We're in good company.
Yes.
Twins. All right. What I'm going to be talking about is...
1 second.
Thank you, Christian. And I know that you probably want me to look at the camera, but I feel like looking at the board, so it's a little bit of, we'll go back and forth. The back of my head is fine, all right. There is a cost in amending our budget. I am well aware that the number that we have voted before, the town feels that they cannot afford. So I would like to show where we are, how we got there, and what the costs involved will be. This is a slide that has been on this presentation for the last 2 years. It's what I said we needed to do if we were going to move our system forward. We were going to have a full implementation of our RTI program. We were going to implement and enhance supervision and instructional leadership. We're going to implement a mass core curriculum at Wareham High School and implement new mass curriculum frameworks K to 12. There are expenses involved in all of those programs. The net school spending number, if we look here on this slide, we have what was available or voted in fiscal 11, what was voted in fiscal 12. We have what this committee passed for fiscal 13. The difference between what we had in 12 and what we said we needed in 13 was $1,804,576, or a 7.1% increase in the budget. There are two articles coming at town meeting that affect this budget number. The first one is Article 20, to see if the town will vote to appropriate and authorize the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, to borrow a sum of money contingent upon the approval of a Proposition 2 1/2 debt exclusion for the purpose of funding the purchase of instructional materials for use in Wareham Public School classrooms, or to take any action relative thereto. On the next slide, we have the explanation. One method that we are trying to use to reduce that difference, that $1,800,000 difference, is to capitalize the purchase of textbooks and technology this year for the fiscal 2013 budget. The sum of money for this article is $341,000, which would increase your taxes one time. If you paid it off in 1 year, if you had a medium-priced assessed house of $230,000, that would cost you $23.19 on your taxes. If we paid it over 5 years, it would add $4.64 per year for 5 years. The way the money is distributed was, go backwards if you could, $251,000 were going to textbooks in elementary literacy and high school mathematics, and $81,000 for computer replacements across the district. Both of those are currently in our budget. So if we can get this voted in the affirmative, and then if the selectmen put it on the ballot, that means we would get this money, we would be able to buy these materials, and we could live without it in our current budget. Article 26, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate, contingent upon the approval of a Proposition 2 1/2 override, a sum of money to avoid teacher layoffs or to take any action relative thereto.
Dr. Rabinovich, I just want everybody to know, certainly those folks at home,
Could you go back to that slide?
that while the article says to raise a sum of money, and this is the second article that says that, the actual motion that would be before town meeting would have a specific dollar amount to be appropriated.
Which is on the next slide.
Exactly.
But Dr. Sylvia has a question.
Go ahead.
The last clause, what exactly does that mean?
In writing these articles, I sat both with Attorney Bowen and with the moderator. And this means that, let's say in hiring a teacher, you needed to spend some money on an advertisement. This would allow you to do that.
Okay, but does it have to be related to teacher layoffs?
Well, the way I have it written, and that is the intent, is that the money would go to replace any teachers that would have to be laid off with a less of a budget number.
But I guess my question is, and I need to understand this because people are asking me about it and I'm a little foggy still. Doesn't it also mean that if we took other steps to reduce the budget, that could, to avoid layoffs, it could be supplemented with this override, is that correct? I'll give you an example. Let's assume for a minute that we said, well, we're not gonna buy a series of textbooks, because it's gonna save a teacher.
Textbooks will no longer be in the budget because of the other
All right,
article.
bad example. Let's assume that we're going to not buy some computers. Another bad example. Let's say that we're not going to
We're not gonna turn on the lights.
Let's say that we're not going to carpet the hallway, all right, and to save a teacher, okay? And this passes, okay? Could we get the teacher? We save the teacher anyways by not carpeting the hallway. Does that mean take any other action relative there too? We could carpet the hallway?
No.
All right. I think it does, but that's all right.
I'm saying no because it is very clear to me, and the language is, and the reason I put it in this way was so that it went to replace teachers.
Okay, thank you.
I think there's a and Dr. Babinovich and I have had this conversation more than once, and we are in complete agreement. There's a fundamental problem with trust in political leadership in this country. Forget about this town. It crosses all boundaries. And that is, if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, you've cried wolf, and every kid understands what crying wolf means. Which means,
No, I understand that.
right? So if we say we need money to do certain things in the form of a debt exclusion or an operational override, and we don't get it, that means we don't do it. Or we do it in the case of the layoffs, and we don't do it in the case of the textbooks and the technology. So everybody should have confidence that this school committee and this superintendent means it when we say, we need this money for this. If we don't get it, the consequences are real.
This next slide, let me just go through the numbers for you. It's kind of small on your handout. The first number is what was budgeted, what this committee voted for the net school spending number for fiscal 13, $27,195,370. The two articles that I've just read, both the 341,000 Article 20 for instructional material and Article 26, the 780,000 for the replacement of teachers, subtotals to $1,121,000. If we reduced our budget by those two article numbers, we would have the net school spending minus articles, which is $26,074,370. But using the draft budget that was passed out by the town administrator on last Saturday, the number that they had for the school department at that point was $25,003,019. That gives us a shortfall, or things that I felt I needed to come up with cuts for, of $1,041,351.
And let me add one more number at the risk of too many numbers. If we were level funded, because the 317-12 draft TA budget is not level funded, if we were level funded, it would still require an additional $683,000 in cuts.
And my first attempt at trying to reduce the budget was to bring it to a level funded budget. And so I went through the budget and I took the first item, tutoring for non-low-income students and additional MCAS remediation.
Excuse me, Dr. Rabinowitz.
I'm sorry.
Go
I need
ahead.
to understand this. So now this is with the premise that's level funded? Is that what this is?
These are the cuts that I am recommending that would bring us to level funded.
Correct, okay.
You're not so much recommending, you're saying these are the cuts that would have to be made to bring us to level funding.
But it's much more significant.
One way to get there.
Yes.
But it's much more significant if the numbers that we've submitted is still there.
I don't even understand the question,
I
so.
don't either. Level, bringing it down the level, we've submitted our budget number.
Yes, so if I
So
understand.
either, to make it work, either we're gonna have to make cuts or the town's gonna have to make cuts.
That is correct.
Right. And if we, in my opinion now, if we did nothing and we went with the number that was voted, that would appear, however, the FinCom, which is the first group to make an amendment to the budget, would cut us below what our last year number was by $250,000. So my feeling is we need to talk about what possible ways there are to reduce our budget to a level that can be supported by the town. And
Another way of
I'm
putting,
just, for discussion purposes, just trying to lay out how we could get there.
another way of putting it is, both Dr. Rabinowitz and I have come to believe that there really isn't any money to support the original budget. And the reason is because on January 25th, when we initially voted, we did not have the revenue figures from the state. So it was perfectly appropriate for us to say, this is what we need in order to run the schools at a level that is good for our kids. It is now clear that even though that's still true, the money to support that doesn't exist unless the revenue is generated by the town itself, because it is not coming from the state. And therefore, I think we need to discuss and potentially vote a new number this evening. Go ahead.
So,
Did you
in
have
the
a question?
budget,
Cliff, did you have a question?
No, I'll wait.
Okay.
this tutoring for non-low-income students and additional MCAS remediation were new programs, not something that was funded in fiscal 12. So here is $86,396 potential dollars to cut,
But I would add, it's been requested by parents.
and by principals. We have run a summer school here at the middle school at no cost to the students for the last, let's call it 4 years, or maybe 5. There is $25,000 in the budget for that summer school. I am recommending cutting all of it. My feeling is, in past, if a child failed a subject and wanted to make up the credits, they went to summer school and they paid for it. And that's putting that back on the table. Additional staff. One of the things you saw is we wanted to implement fully mass core, and therefore we were adding 2 staff for the high school and some other additional staff. That is cut in this budget. So that, you know, that additional staff is gone, $145,000. Custodial costs, that would be from reducing the number of custodians and reducing the number of overtime and also substitute custodian time. Secretarial costs would come down to the loss of a secretary. Administration, that's spread throughout the district. There are about 3 FTEs involved in this, $147,674. other cuts, substitutes, and some other miscellaneous cuts, $60,000. The savings from the people who have already told us that they are going to retire and replacing them with fairly young new teachers, savings of $114,395. That subtotal of adding up all those cuts is $676,135. In order to get there, because if I remember from the previous slide, we were looking at a number of about $1 million. So we have the subtotal costs. So the shortfall from that other slide was $1,041,351. The subtotal of the things that I showed you were $676,135. That leaves a deficit of, on Saturday's number, the deficit was $366,216. But at 4 o'clock this afternoon, after I met with the town administrator, there was another $157,000 added back to our budget number on the working papers. Therefore, the shortfall is $228,441. So, I looked at 3 very popular items: extracurricular activities, sports, and the instructional leader program. I looked for a number that would add up to what I needed at the top, which was $228,441. By taking 30% of each of those numbers, I came up with $223,747 worth of cuts. I'm $4,000 or $5,000 away from making it work if that was the number.
Before you leave that slide, I'm sure I'm not the only one who might have a question there. But before I ask the question, anybody else on the committee have a question about anything on that slide? Well, then I'll start. I'm not sure exactly what 30% of all sports means. What does that mean?
It means I have a certain amount of money left. I go to the athletic director, the high school principal, and say, what can we offer with the money that's left? Therefore, if we have activities where we have fewer students involved, they'll be gone. We won't be able to offer them. If we have, perhaps we won't be able to offer freshman sports. I can't tell you the exact cost. All I know is I have to come up with a way to make the budget work so that we can open school in the fall if we don't have enough money. And my feeling is if I'm going to be dropping 22 teachers, I need to look at everything. Nothing is sacrosanct. I don't want to make any of these cuts.
I understand. Okay. I just wanted to understand what that 30% meant. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
When I was pondering some of the comments of the town over that we need to cut our budget because they have to cut their budget and that there's not enough money, I went back and I looked at 4 years. And I looked at the difference in general government that does not include health care, because our number, net school spending, in this particular, does not include health care. So there's no in-kind on either side of this equation. I looked at what was approved at town meeting from the budgets, and we see that if you average it, 2 years ago when we had a new administration in town, the budget went up 13%, or $1,140,000. $174,322. The school department that year went up 3%, or $742,617. That was the healthcare holiday people were talking about, that money was added to our budget. It was also added to the town budget, plus all of the growth that year was added to the town's budget. So when we then begin cutting once again, and then if we do the average over 4 years, even after the cuts that the town said that they will make in this year, the town's budget has gone up 2.25%. The school department's has gone up 1.25%. From the very beginning in our budget discussions, what I have been asking for is fairness. So I put this out to those people that think we're overspending and that we're not being fiscally responsible. I don't agree. We have a hard decision to make, and the decision is whether or not we're going to cut our budget, and if we don't, then we go into town meeting, and in my estimation, it is not going to be a pretty sight, because then it's going to be one department against another department. And it will be safety versus education versus clean streets and other services. From the beginning, the problem that we have, it's not the expenditures, it is our revenue. We don't have enough for what we need. That's why we're coming before the town and asking for the override and for the debt exclusions. And that I would hope people will come out and support it and give a clear message that it needs to be on the ballot so that our town citizens can make that decision. Lastly, using some of the slides from here, I will be creating a newsletter for town meeting. It will go out before that to our schools, as well as websites and other places. I have been meeting with parents. I will continue to meet with parents about what they can do to support our needs for the children of this community. All of us hopefully will be there to attend town meeting and to get out and vote on April 3rd to support the children of Wareham. And after the election, contact your elected officials with regards to your wishes about the support of our overrides and debt exclusions. Mr. Chairman, I'm finished. And I better not run for office.
I'll continue with transportation, then I'll open it up for comments and questions. When we voted on January 25th, let's call that Plan A. What did Plan A represent? I'm going to specifically avoid numbers because they really aren't in many ways necessary. Plan A was to take an operating budget of about $1,585,000, and that would be self-supporting. It would be enough so that we would not have to cover any deficit with the revolver. And then with a combination of the revolver surplus plus the school's share of the meals tax and a hoped-for contribution from the Capital Planning Committee, those three pieces, we would have enough money to start the process of replacing our fleet so that we would end up with a fleet that averaged about 5 years in age and nothing more than 10 years. That was Plan A. It's my opinion that Plan A is dead. The reason it's dead is because it's clear that the operating budget of $1,585,000 is simply not available as a result of a shortage of revenue for the town. It's also dead because although we initially were offered $100,000 of the meals tax revenue, that has been removed from the town administrator's budget as recently as Saturday morning. And finally, the Capital Planning Committee doesn't get to print money either. So their ability to contribute money to the replacement of buses has also disappeared, despite the fact that I think they made their best efforts and would like to have done so. So for all those reasons, I think Plan A is dead. So that brought us to Plan B. Plan B was to accept a lower and level funded operating budget of $1,341,000 and take the surplus that the revolver is expected to generate, combine those two pieces to create essentially a balanced operating budget. But notice, to balance the operating budget, we now need in Plan B the revolver. And then we would use our share of the meals tax, which disappeared Saturday morning, plus a debt exclusion for an amount that was initially planned to be approximately $360,000, but when that meals tax disappeared, it probably needs to be a little bit more than that. And that would get us the same break-even operation plus a replacement of the fleet so that it would average 5 years and nothing older than 10.
Mr. Chair, just a point of information.
Yes.
Clarify that $100,000, yes, it was taken out of the non-net and put in to the net to close the gap. It went into the general, correct? I just want to make sure that disappear, the $100,000 is still proposed, but it's just not in the non-net.
I suppose to the extent that all money is fungible, but it disappeared from the availability for the transportation budget and to replace vehicles. But your point is well taken. So what do we have left of Plan B? The real problem with Plan B is that the debt exclusion is an unknown. The meals tax is not available. Any portion of the meals tax is not available. And there doesn't seem to be a consensus among the political leadership in the town that there should be support for the debt exclusion for this, specifically for transportation. I was hoping that out of the action committee, I would be able to report to you that there would be. But in fact, when we were hoping a motion would include a debt exclusion component for supporting transportation, it was specifically not included. So we are now at the point of having to consider a Plan C. I am not smiling. Plan C would still have the lowered level funded operating budget, and it would still require the revolver surplus to support the overall transportation department. But now, in order to replace any vehicles, since we cannot count on the debt exclusion, it would require two things. One, it would require reducing our services to the students of Wareham so that grades 7 through 12 would not be transported. which is legally possible because K through 6 is the only thing that's legally mandated. And we have been transporting some students that are less than 2 miles away, primarily for the safety of the children, given that not all children live in places that are sidewalked, etc. It would also require bus fees. Now, bus fees are a difficult issue because the more you charge, the fewer people choose to ride. So you can literally get to a point of having a fee but nobody riding. So there's no point in having a fee that's very high. Dr. Bravinovich's experience and study of this matter suggests that any number much more than about $90 or $100 per child is unlikely to produce the volume of ridership that would generate much money. In fact, his experience suggests that we can probably collect no more than about $60,000 in bus fees from the community. Keep in mind that that's partly due to the fact that about half our students are free and reduced lunch, which means that they cannot be charged, and the fact that you are, since you're not transporting grades 7 through 12, you've obviously eliminated all those people from paying any fee because they're not being provided any service. So if you take the savings associated primarily with reduced numbers of drivers, associated with reducing the service, and you take, which is approximately worth about $130,000, and you assume you collect about $60,000 worth of fees, you get, let's round number, call it about approximately $200,000. Unfortunately, they're better than guesstimates, but there's some hope involved in this, and not a lot of science is available. So I don't have a great deal of confidence in these numbers, but let's assume it's approximately $200,000. That's about half of what we need to support a fleet that averages 5 years in age, nothing more than 10 years. So we would then be relegating our average fleet age not to 5 years, but 10. Averaging 10, which means obviously there will be buses that will be much older than 10 as well as some that are younger than 10. So it would be slightly better than we are today, but not much. Now, the reality of this needs to be emphasized. We have a legal obligation to provide transportation to children K through 6 who live further than 2 miles away. No matter how much we don't want to spend money, and no matter how much we don't want to have debt exclusions or overrides or any combination of the two, we cannot avoid having a transportation services, whether privatized or not, for these children. And so Plan C, frankly, is we have to have a plan. It's not possible to kick this down the road, as the saying goes. So I'm not saying I like either Plan B or Plan C, but there is no question that Plan C is probably the minimum we could possibly spend and meet our legal requirement, and the only question is how long we could get away with having a fleet that averaged 10 years in age. So I will take questions on transportation. Cliff.
You said we have a legal obligation to transport students through grade 6. And that's true. But if I could just interject, we have a moral obligation. We have a moral obligation because we've heard over and over and over again about the risk factor of transporting kids. Well, I want to tell you right now, the risk factor is a lot greater if we've got kids walking our streets, because there are very few sidewalks in Wareham. And so I contend that we have a legal obligation, yes, but we have a moral obligation. We have so few sidewalks that we are putting a greater risk on our kids, and I can't support that under any circumstance, and I won't.
Any other,
But nobody's gonna ask me anyways.
I second it.
I heard a second. Any other questions or comments on the transportation non-net issue? Okay, then I'd like to move to the next item on the agenda, which we obviously are essentially in, which is, do we want to vote some new numbers for both either non-net, net, or both? My recommendation is that we consider doing that and have a discussion about the virtues of doing so at this moment. So both non-net and net are on the table for discussion. Cliff?
Is it for discussion?
Yes. There is no motion on the floor.
All right. I guess this has to do with the presentation that Dr. Rabinovich made on the presumption of a level-funded budget. I guess I can't put my finger on it with any degree of certainty, but I would hope that if it came down to having to make massive cuts, that the cut strategy that was presented tonight would remain fluid. I would like to have a little bit more input, and I know it's not my job. I know that's reserved for our chief executive officer, but I think times being what they are, that some discussion about for these cuts might ensure, because might be a good thing, because again, an awful lot of this depends on where our override articles, how they move, and the level of approval. But I think that we all have a perception of the cut process, and we all get our updates. And I just think that while I appreciate the efforts and the sincerity of what was presented tonight, some of us may have some ideas on other areas to cut. With that being said, I can honestly say that we also have to face the reality that some of these 2.5 override articles will not pass. And whether they pass or don't pass, we're still going to have layoffs. But certainly, if they do not pass, the layoffs are going to be that much more severe. But we cannot get out of this if they don't pass without those draconian layoffs. However, getting back to the cuts, I am of the mindset that before we totally dismantle the academic framework of Wareham Public Schools, we have to look at all things in terms of cuts. And 30% on sports may not be enough. 30% on extracurricular may not be enough.
No, excuse me, I think it was 100% of extracurricular.
Well, whatever,
No, it's only 30%.
30%.
I didn't see any 30% next to it.
Well, all I'm saying,
Okay,
all I'm
thank you.
saying now, based on what scenarios transpire, I am not willing to approve cuts that are going to dismantle the academic framework of Wareham Public Schools while we provide some extracurricular activities. Now, I'll tell you, extracurricular means everything to these kids, but it's the key word on that is extra. And so we're going to have cuts, but I would hope that when it really comes down to putting the pen to the paper, I would be in favor of looking at every possible scenario that would minimize minimize the cuts, preserve as best we can the academic framework of Wareham Public Schools. And if that means taking a good hard look at not offering athletics or not offering extracurricular, if it's going to save the academic framework of our school system, then I think that that's what we got to do. So all I'm saying is, I would hope that all things would be on the table if, in fact, we have to put the cut pen to the paper. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ken?
I agree. I also, I think I saw something a while back that there was a number associated if we looked at potential closing of, say, the Wareham Cooperative School. How does that number, I think off the top of my head was 500,000, maybe less?
Less,
A little less, 300,000?
yeah.
So I like to look, for us to take a deep look at that option too, because the last thing that I will vote for anything that involves any further cuts in teachers. I don't see how we can keep the doors open if we are focusing on this. Look like 20-something teachers.
19.5 teachers, that's right.
It's impossible. It's impossible to continue to run a quality education if we are looking at cuts and teachers involved. I don't
Well, it's
see.
teachers plus other personnel.
Well, I understand that, but I like us to look at other options. And
I do too.
If it means taking a look at the co-op school, that will save an additional 15 teachers. All of this has to be looked at. I can't support it the way it is right now.
Rhonda?
I have to agree with my colleagues when it comes to the scenarios when it comes to the cuts, because I would want to see more than, and I know you didn't mean it this way, Dr. Rabinovich, but it's not, I don't want to look at just the popular items. I want to look, and I'll put quotes around these that, because everyone will have a different definition of what non-essential is, but something that gives different scenarios around different scenarios about what the cuts are going to be. And I know that ultimately it's up to you to make the cuts necessary to have a school system that educates the system, or the kids here in Wareham. I want to be clear that you can take a look at the budget and the line items, and it has gone through committee by committee. The principals have gone through it, the administrators have gone through it. The FinCom has had an opportunity to review it. And when you take a look at the line items and all the presentations that were done on the line items, yes, I think that there could be different opinions on where you could cut. There's $156,000 in administration. Some people would say bump that up to $300,000. Okay, that's still $150,000. We're over $1 million a shortfall here, and so there is no amount of going back and forth with each line item that is going to get you to that without including teachers in it. There just isn't. And that is the scary part about this, because we hear from our principals every single day that around class sizes, around making sure that the teachers have everything that they need in the classroom, and every single time that we cut, it just continues to pull away from what our kids need, and we have to stop the slashing. I understand that we're in a difficult financial state here, and I also understand, and I've been through many of the budget discussions with the town. I know that there's not money there. We do, though, have to look at ways to keep the bare minimum that we have right now with our to educate our kids, and so I think it's important to show that we are making the necessary cuts, or not even necessary, but that we are willing to make the cuts. But so I do believe that we need to vote in a new budget number. But I think at least to be able to show that the school system understands the issue that we're in and will and is working towards getting to a number that's closer to what we can agree at town meeting.
I want to make 2 points, and they're related to the budget, but otherwise quite separate. One is, I don't think there should be any misunderstanding about the difficulty on the town side of this problem. It was very clear from Saturday morning that while we didn't come to any agreement, that very difficult cuts and very significant assumptions are being made about what has to be done on the town side of government, including literally salary cuts of town employees. Not just no increases, salary cuts and 4-day-a-week operations and things like that. So these are really tough times on both sides of the town and the schools. The second item that I think we shouldn't dismiss, I was having a conversation with a teacher today, and we were talking about the fact that the state is mandating that there be a number of things, including 2 sources of data as a basis for determining the grade, the evaluation that the teacher receives. And what was interesting to me about the conversation is when I proposed a possible use of data for this particular teacher and the department that she was in, she said, that would be fair as long as I had the resources to be successful. I'm smiling only because she's 100% right. It is totally inappropriate to try to implement state regulations with respect to the evaluation of teachers and then to be in a process of dismantling the very structure and to reducing to an unacceptable level the resources and raising class sizes to unacceptable levels, and at the same time saying you will be successful in the classroom. It's just not going to work, and no one is going to want to be a teacher in Wareham. So I think we need to recognize that there are sometimes, if not unintended consequences, forgotten consequences associated with cuts that get made on paper and then have to be implemented. Having said that, I do think it's a good idea to make some changes in the numbers that we voted on January 25th. And as a minimum, what I'm recommending, and we'll take a motion if the committee is inclined to do so, that we reduce the non-net spending number down to the $1,341,652 that is in the town administrator's budget. It will require that the revolver be used to supplement it in order to be a break-even situation for the operating budget for transportation. And we can hope that the good people of Wareham will see the need for the debt exclusion so that that's the source of funds for replacing our vehicles. That would be a $243,000 and $243,625 cut in the non-net transportation budget. And the second thing I'm recommending is the value of the debt exclusion for the textbooks and technology and the value of the override to reduce the number of layoffs necessary. I say reduce because there still will be some.
Yes, they will.
Reduce the number of layoffs necessary. Those two combined add up to $1,121,000, as you saw in Dr. Rabinovich's presentation. That would bring the net school spending number down to $26,074,370. So if the committee is so inclined, or if anybody on the committee is so inclined, I would like separate motions to do that at least. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't recommend a different number. I'm just saying as a minimum, I think we need to do that. I think the numbers are somewhat fluid. They changed at 5 a.m. on Saturday morning from the material that I had from the previous day. They changed today as a result of discussions. I think it's quite likely that on April 4th, when this committee meets again, there may be a reason to vote a different number at that time as well. But I think in good faith, we should show the community that we recognize that our original budget is no longer realistic and that we need to be sensitive to the difficult times that the entire town is facing with respect to resources. And I will repeat what I said on Saturday morning. Both the town side of government and the school side of government for the last more than a decade has been exceedingly frugal. And this is, as Dr. Rabinovich said, this is a revenue problem not an overspending problem on either side, both town and schools. Would anybody like to make a motion with regard to the budget numbers?
I have one quick question.
Yes.
For the non-net spending, by reducing it by 243,625, are you saying that if the debt exclusion is not passed, that will then mean that we'll have to go to Plan C, which is charging bus fees, reducing who we transport to, or a combination of both?
Yes, that is my opinion. Dr. Rabinovich may have a different opinion, but that's my opinion.
But I believe we will come back to the board once we know what number is passed and whether or not the override is passed. We will come back to the board with recommendations because we feel we need your approval if we're going to do any of those steps.
I agree completely with that, but mine is just based on a mathematical analysis, and it's not based on anything else, and it would require the committee to act.
So the only other question that I have, the 1.341,652, is that the exact number that's in the town's budget?
That is
And it's what
correct.
we were funded at last year.
Okay.
It's level funded, and it's consistent with the town administrator's number.
Okay. The 26,074,370, what is the difference between that number and what is in the town administrator's budget?
$1,041,351. Actually, no, there's a 200, because that's using
I was
the
going to say,
Saturday morning number,
Well,
not
you know, we can
the,
only do what we
Right.
can do.
Cliff?
You know, I guess I don't understand it all fully, and I gotta be honest with you on that. But something really, really bothers me. Let's talk about non-net for a minute. You know, this total transportation thing has been bounced around forever and a day. Bottom line is, regardless of who does it, you gotta transport kids, whether it be first through sixth. The bottom line is you can't get away from this expense. Whether we provide it or whether somebody else provides it, you gotta pay the bill. But here's the thing that really kind of bugs me about this number and about the proposal, particularly from the town administrator. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, this 1341,652 is predicated on using a great deal of our revolver, is that correct?
That is correct. Last year, we supported it to the tune of $188,000.
$180,000.
Well,
$180,000.
isn't that interesting now that we're using our revolver to offset this expense? And if we were subbing this thing out, there'd be no revolver.
Correct.
That's correct.
Isn't that interesting? So now they're asking us to use the revolver because of our ingenuity and our creativity to offset the town's obligation to transport kids. So this number is predicated on using a good part of the revolver.
Candidly, times are really difficult. I have no problem with the fact that they're asking us to use the revolver. The issue I will have is if we don't get any money to replace the fleet.
This is ridiculous. I'm sorry.
For non-net, I will make a motion to reduce the number that the school committee voted on by 243,625.
To the new number of,
1,341,652.
do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Abstain? Ken, are you voting?
I said aye.
Oh, I didn't hear the aye, sorry. 400. Is there a motion with regard to net school spending?
So, again, just so I know what
Please.
we're talking about.
Yes.
So this number, this recommendation of 26,074,370 is, again, with the presumption that the overrides are gonna pass.
I wouldn't call it a presumption. What you can say is that if the override and the debt exclusion passes, then the schools will be fully funded at the level that we originally voted. That is correct.
Not the 2674, 370?
No, the combination of the 2674, 370 plus the override to support the
Gotcha.
elimination of
It will
te-
bring us up to 27, 195, gotcha.
That's
All right.
exactly right.
All right.
Which was the original number.
All right, gotcha. I understand. So, the reality is, again, just to make sure I know what we're talking about, whether the override passes or not, there's gonna be cuts in personnel.
Yes,
So the override is not gonna save every personnel.
that is
There's gonna
correct.
be cuts. Okay, thank you.
It will reduce the amount.
Right.
Do I have any motion with regard to net school spending?
So moved.
Was there a motion? Oh, so moved? Thank you, Ken. Do I have a,
What is he?
okay,
He has to tell me what he's moving.
Use the number, Kenny. 26,
Then-
474.
$26,074,370.
For net school
for
spending.
net school spending.
Correct.
Thank you, Ken. Do I have a second?
Second for discussion.
We have a second for discussion. Yes.
I think that the only concern that I have about voting on this one is that we're still $1 million apart, $1,041,351. So I think that I would be willing to support this reduction, knowing that the committee will have to come together and decide on what number they're going into town meeting with. Because right now, the number that, correct me if I'm wrong, the number that we're voting on right now will still go into town meeting. We will still go into town meeting if we keep this number with an unbalanced budget. The TA would go in with an unbalanced budget because our number would be the 26,074,370. His number in his budget has us at 1,041,000 less than that.
As I said earlier, this is a dynamic situation, number one. I would predict that this committee will be asked to revote again, potentially as early as April 4th. And on top of that, we have been invited by the Finance Committee to come to their meeting on the 28th. In fact, I would like to know what members would like to be there, because depending on the number of members that want to attend, that would be 6:30, March 28th, Multi-Service Center. Depending on the number of people that would like to attend, we will need to post it as a meeting. I plan to be there. I think Rhonda has indicated she can and would like to be there. Are there any other members who
I
would like to?
probably shouldn't be. No, not because I'll go crazy, but because of other reasons.
Okay,
Because I have to abstain on one part of the budget.
I understand, fair point. And nevertheless, if you wanted to be there, I don't think you should feel reticent to be there, because you're always a valuable presence, and I say that with total respect, as
Well,
you
thank
know.
you.
Do you plan to attend?
What date is it, again?
March 28th.
Wednesday, March 28th, 6:30 PM, Multi-Service Center.
And Jeff,
Yes.
through you,
March 28th.
Cliff, one of the reasons why it's important for me to be there is because, again, it is another data point for me to hear how the committees, with the due diligence that they're doing, new ideas, different ideas. It's another data point in my head that allows me to go in and make the right choice on April 4th.
So it's just for the FinCom.
Just with the
FinCom.
FinCom, that's correct.
And
I'll be there if you want me there.
Absolutely. Ken?
I will not be there.
Okay, but we will have three, so we need to post that as a meeting, and the entire agenda will be the FY13 budget.
discussion with FinCom, right?
Yes, exactly.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to state, I will not be there, not because I don't want to, but I am on call with my job all through next week.
You never have to say that, Ken. I completely understand. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and we are still in discussion. Is there any other questions or concerns or comments that people would like to make? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed? And we have an abstention, so it's 3-0-1. I think that's enough for this evening for the fiscal year 13 report. We have covered item 7.
Don't you have to do total net school spending?
Point well taken, thank you very much. The total now is $27,416,022, which for the record is a reduction of $1,364,625. I'll take a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstain? 3-1-0. Thank you. Now we have concluded fiscal year 13 for the moment. Item 7 was already covered. We will move on to Ms. Miranda. You're on, Anna.
Can I ask
Sorry.
Michelle one question? Did Principal Palladino think that he had an item on tonight's? Because he was sitting there waiting patiently until just now, but,
Probably.
all right, so I
gonna go after
didn't remember if he has some on April 4th, right? All right, so,
Let's hope not.
yeah, okay.
Okay, Anna, thank you.
First on the agenda is I have an appropriation budget transfer recommendation for you. I'm recommending that the following appropriation budget transfer of $12,923. And this is in order to pay,
Excuse me, Anna. I just want to, I was reminded by Rhonda that we are approaching the hour of 10 o'clock.
I
I-
suppose I could do a real
No. We haven't heard from you on finances in a while, and I do not want to put it off. And I want the committee to be able to ask questions. I actually think, I hate to do this to you.
Yeah, I think,
Okay,
absolutely,
but
because if I start talking about this
Right.
at 10 o'clock, we're not going home.
We're not going home, exactly right. It's too important to push it off until too late. So we will push off mid-cycle review of
Once
Dr.
again.
Rabinovich's goals once again. Thank you for that reminder. So,
My
Anna,
short-term memory, what were the?
Anna, you've got 8 minutes. See if you can do that.
the recommendation is to supplement what we need to pay the full salary of the system network IT specialist. If you recall, we eliminated an addition, a second tech para position at the middle school, took that funding and applied it to this position, and now the shortfall is $12,923. We'd like to take that from the middle tech para salaries.
Do you need a motion on that? I think you do. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 3-0-0. Next.
Correct, okay. In the interest of time, unless there's some, significant variance, I'm gonna just try to go right through. The administration accounts were only 2.28% off of where we were last year. We move on to the instructional leadership. Not much has changed really, it stayed pretty constant. We're 3.25% off of where we were last year. We get into teaching, and of course, this is a very important barometer for us, because if you look at more than 80% of our budget is in the salaries in this teacher and teacher specialist lines. We're really, it's healthy, have no concerns thus far. Did salary projections at the end of the second quarter. I haven't seen you since then, actually, it's been that long. December, and we were off salaries at that point by around $78,000, which is a really very, very good, being there. And questions about that? I do want to share, I have good news and not so good news on the substitutes line. This substitute line, I have really good news, and I think it's important to take the time to share it. This is the substitute line that for teacher absences when it comes to sick days and personal days. And right now, we have expended, we compare where we were last year at this point to today. I actually ran the figures today. They're even more updated than what's on the screen. We have expended $80,323 less in this substitute line. And that's the line that really is dedicated to for when, sicknesses and personal days.
But
The not so good news when we get to professional subs, we're running around almost 19,000 in deficit, and when I get to it, we'll talk about why. So overall, in these 2,000 instructional accounts, we're actually in the plus by around 2% comparison to last year. So, any questions?
Ken looked like he wanted to know the difference between the two.
I did. I was just looking at it. Continue. To answer the question.
In the professional.
I thought she said she was gonna answer that in the next.
Well, two more.
Okay.
In the professional, why we're off. In the professional student services, which is guidance in our psych departments, the variance is 3.28%. And again, most of that is in that first, the guidance counselor line. Again, that was loss of ARA, an entire guidance position, as well as another smaller FTE that we have to put back into the LEA budget. ARA's gone. Other student services, 1.82%, really no variance, anything significant to report. All right, now we get to professional development. In professional development, in the 2353 function code, that's the staff development line. Our deficit is not there. It is strictly in the sub-line for professional development. Right now, regular ed teachers, in that account, we were 14.5. We've only planned a little under 5 to begin with. Therefore, right now, we spent around 19,000 for subs. For SPED teachers, again, they're a smaller portion of, percentage of the teaching force. We're 5,000 in deficit in that account. So cumulatively, we're looking at, this is what we have. Now, the reason is the amount of training that we've done. A year ago when we planned this 12th budget, we were not looking at doing the amount of training that, so what was allocated is, we know now, is definitely insufficient. And I don't want you to think that this is all, we're actually even spending more, because we have some monies that have been planned for. We have a literacy grant, a specific grant. And again, the problems with grants, you can only spend it on XYZ as per the department wants.
Excuse me, Anna. Excuse me, Anna. Could I have a motion to allow Anna to complete her report, then go past 10 o'clock?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? 400. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Anna.
So
2 minutes.
for example, the literacy grant we have right now is paying for, will pay for about 90% of all the training we're doing with our elementary teachers in literacy. We're doing, training in informational text. It's a lot of training that Jan has been overseeing. We've got some money for that. We had math training that informed. Again, those, these initiatives were planned after the initial budget. And that's where we're really running our deficits, and that's the reason why for professional development. And it will continue yet because we still have training that needs to get done. It's money well spent. Our teachers need this time and the support and the training if we're truly going to expect them to be able to, fulfill the expectations that we have in terms of them implementing, what we're training them for. So that's why, you look at that line, it's in the substitute line, not so much the staff development line.
That's true.
And the variance is about 15%.
1 second.
So what are you expecting that deficit to be at the end of the year? What are you projecting that?
I've requested those numbers, some of those numbers from the two directors. I have them from Bob. Waiting on a few more from Jan in terms of projecting to the end of the year, and I'll have that answer most likely for you by the next school committee meeting. I just need a little bit more information.
Okay.
From one of the directors.
Mr. Chair, I would like to see.
Cross that out.
Just to, that will be made up from other accounts. Anna has frozen spending in other places to make up for any
Okay.
anticipated deficit.
Dr. Benedict just basically informs you of, so now, as of 2 weeks ago, administrative meeting, informed the principals that only essential purchasing, yes, paper towels, toilet paper, we've got to call the plumber, we've got to fix the electrical, when it happens, but that's, about it. Until, I'll feel a bit better, actually pretty soon, March 30th, end of third quarter. We'll do the salary projections again, get a feel. By then, we won't be really spending from my heating accounts, so all these little variables, and then I'll look at what's being projected to figure out, where we're gonna be, and whether or not we need to be concerned.
There's something really troubling about the fact that we've now defined essential as paper towels and toilet paper.
Good point. Good point.
Bothers me greatly.
Okay.
Okay, so any other questions for professional development? In our instructional materials, we've got a 7.93% variance, but again, that's, we've talked about this, we've actually spent more in our instructional, others that we had, and textbooks, paper, again, look at the paper, we 19% remaining now comparison to 66% previous year. I recently was made aware that Barnstable County will be doing the paper bid again. We have been able to save considerable money in doing that bulk purchasing with that group. I've been able to tweak some monies to be able to even like pre-order, because we even get even a more discount. I'm not sure I'm gonna be there. I'm not gonna take a chance until March 30th and new numbers and looking at, where we're gonna be. It may have to wait until the July 1 year kicks in, but again, ideally, I'd like to shoot for being able to spend down some money that way. To give you an idea, last year, paper, this district cost us about $31,000. And that's about where we are. Anywhere from like $28,000 to $31,000 for all the sites for paper.
Would it be a true statement that our expenditures on paper have increased since we stopped procuring textbooks, and a lot of that is now
Workbooks,
copied?
yeah. I've seen that pattern.
It'd be interesting to see.
Even if I go back even from when I was a principal and looking
Right.
at what we had to spend every single year, what you're giving up is the workbook. Okay, now I'm giving up, now I have to duplicate. I have to run copies and textbooks, outdated textbooks.
Right, it's almost interesting to see a report that would show if we were to purchase textbooks, what it would result in potential savings from all the copying that we're doing now. And I'm sure we've done for the last 5 years.
More in the supplementary materials than the textbooks, because textbooks are a bit more difficult. I mean, teachers find other creative ways to get that information from the textbook to the kids. You know, in presentation now, you know, with the technology that we have, they can do that. But it's when you then want to assess that student's independent functioning on the learning that you got to run off paper because you don't have a workbook to be able to correct her.
Thank you.
So that's for instructional materials. Operations and maintenance right now. Again, good and bad news, okay? Not really bad, but just, you know, more not as positive. In our heating accounts right now, we have expended $34,653 less than where we were this time last year. Mr. Sweat had asked, you know, I was kind of hoping that as we got to the end here, we would have seen more of a savings, considering that it was so mild. It was such a mild. But again, it's those cold mornings that when they have to, you know, we regulate, we bring the temperatures down to that, you know, 55 to 60, and it's getting these systems up.
And it's even worse than that, in the sense that if you take the difference between the two numbers, the budgeted amount and the amount remaining, right? There's very little difference between the 2 years. Very little difference. How is that possible? There's not a person watching who
Because we
isn't
had
grateful.
different amounts
We-
to begin
we-
with. Remember, we
we
did
cut
reduce some of
money
our
out where
heating.
we thought
We
we
have
were
a
over
lower,
budgeted.
No, time out. Let me make sure we're talking apples to apples. I'm looking at a budget of $365,000. Yes?
yes,
Okay. That compares to a budget of $341,000 for last year. So we actually budgeted about $24,000 more, okay? I'm looking at a amount remaining of $203,000, and last year the amount remaining was $175,000. So if you literally take the difference between those two numbers,
It's
there's
not
almost no savings. And I guarantee you, I've saved on propane, and I guarantee you, people out there have saved on heating oil and natural gas. How is it possible with all of this wonderful weather, 10 degrees warmer, sometimes a lot more, how's it possible we haven't saved more money?
right, well, and I'm kind of disappointed. I expected for us to save a lot more too, because it was so mild, but we basically have only, it's 34,000 in terms of if you're just comparing expenditure, not
I
what
wish
was
our former
budgeted.
energy czar was here, Mr. Palladino.
We could ask him.
We could ask him why
It's only $34,000 less
cost
than
on it?
what we had
Well,
paid
prices are
out the
elevated.
same time last year. Last year was FY11.
I'm not
we
sure
had
about the bid. I
expended
think the bid
223,000
locked it
by
at what it
I
was
think,
last year.
I think we hedged our prices.
189.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I
true.
think we did.
The bid, you're right.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on it given the hour, but I'm just disappointed that it's essentially no savings.
Maybe it's those single pane windows.
Unfortunately, in the utilities, we're actually falling behind. We've actually expended 47,780 more. And I started really looking at, what I'm seeing is the cost of fuel is affecting everything. In our own department, I started looking at, you know, on a monthly basis, if you go back 2 years ago, our fuel bill, but that would be for all transportation, all grounds, and we have the driver's ed card. Those are the three things that we do fuel up. It was maybe 22,000 in October and in this period of time in 2010. 2011, up to about 24. We are now paying 29,000, around 28 to 29,000 a month in fuel costs. I'm seeing invoices. People are adding fuel surcharge. You know, their businesses are reacting to, you know, the fact that it's costing them more, you know, to get the services to us, to do whatever they need to do. So I'm wondering if part of that utility, too, is everything's gone up, incrementally, and a lot of it, I think, has to do with its fuel. Fuel is driving some of this deficit, I believe. Any other questions? In our insurance and tuition accounts, other tuition accounts, the variance 14.8, that basically is because we have 432,000 encumbered in our 9,000 accounts to pay out special ed tuition. That's really the difference, the variance there.
So if I had 700 last year, 300 less means I'll
So
still
in summary,
plus at the end.
right now, in our LEA, the LEA total, our balance right now is, we're only 2.49, 2.5% variance, which is around 632,000, but then 432 is that what's been encumbered. So it's leaving us about a $200,000 difference, which right now, I'm comfortable with that, that's fine. In the non-net, we have right now, it's actually less, 4.5%. We've spent
That's
about
not good.
12,815 more in our transportation budget right now as we did previous. And again, I think fuel is definitely a part of it. And that's under that supply line. Also increased repairs and also increased services. We are transporting more special ed kids that do require,
And homeless.
funding. I was just looking at what we've had to pay out, since we've had to bid out two of these private companies. And right now, it's costing us about $1,325 a week for these 2 runs, 5 days. You've got approximately about 12 more weeks left for school, so we're going to incur at least another $15,900.
Which runs are these?
These are the 2 runs that we don't have vehicles to do the runs for. We've
Oh,
had
I
to-
understand.
yeah, we've
These are
had
the
2
vans.
contracts, so
Yes.
that's like also an additional unforeseen cost that.
But I recall that we decided it made more sense to actually put good money after bad rather than going to private contractors. Didn't we repair at least one of the vans?
There's been more discussion with the mechanic who really didn't feel that was a wise investment because of other issues with that vehicle.
So many issues.
Okay. Is that what you wanted to say? Go ahead, Ann.
All right, so in there, so okay, so that's a little bit, it was 4.5. Right now, so in total, if we look at our LEA and non-net, it's actually less than 1%. The variance right now is around 246,122 if you're looking at both, both the net and the non-net. Any other questions? Revolving accounts, I would just say to you, do you have any questions? We really have not had any significant activity in these, particular revolving accounts going down the entire list that we have. Here I'm just sharing with you, this is previous balance this time last year, just to kind of gauge revenue, looking at revenue stream. For these revolving accounts that do involve, whether it's tuition and or receipts.
Any question on the revolvers? I do notice the transportation revolver is 15,000 less than it was at this time last year, and of course, the need for it to support the deficit that's growing in the regular transportation department is even greater this year than last year, so that obviously is a concern. Yes.
What is the insurance revolver? Sorry.
That would be, for example, when we do file an insurance claim. It's vandalism or some damage. We then we will end up paying for a repair. You have to then, when the insurer sends us
check, it has to go into a
That
It
revolving.
goes into
It
that,
has to
yeah.
go into this
Thank you.
revolving account. And those are the only funds that then would go into that.
You all set, Anna? Yes.
You are, Kenny?
I just want to go back to,
Previous slide.
help me out, Jeff.
The last set of accounts?
Substitute.
Oh,
Okay, all right.
Substitute, you said good news, bad news. I just want a little explanation on
Well,
what was.
good news is we've spent a lot less.
Well, the explanation on what you considered professional, and you had two versions over there.
yeah,
No,
the difference is that in one case, the teacher is simply absent from the school.
Right.
That's where we've saved money. In the second case, they're present, but not in the classroom. They're doing something else like professional development.
That's what,
development.
it's all
Okay.
professional development that's driving that deficit. Not-
Training.
Not the
Thank you.
regular attendance,
Right.
sick or personal days.
But the
All
net
training.
is still favorable.
Yeah.
Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Any other business that people would like to bring before the committee? Yes,
Mid-cycle review? No?
we have decided to
we,
postpone it.
Okay.
We postponed it till February of 2038.
Because
Oh.
you'd all be asleep.
Mr. Chair, at some point, will we be having Mr. Tatro back in front of us to give us a report? As I don't think the transportation has been brought up for quite a few meetings.
Be happy to do so. Our agendas have been,
Yeah,
to say the least, full.
I think the next one, we have the athletic report, as well as another thing that Mr.
Okay.
Palladino is doing. School calendar, and there are some other things, plus my mid-cycle. Perhaps the one after that will do the.
Well, maybe we can be
Transportation.
optimistic, and maybe our transportation subcommittee can actually do something.
But your point is well taken, Ken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second, we are adjourned.